Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show veteran firefighter and realtor Dan Lennon. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from Dan's journey into the fire service, the importance of firefighter fitness, the brother and sisterhood at the 343 Hero Challenge, how a side profession can not only give financial security, but also help with the transition out of the fire service, the 2472, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Dan Lennon. Enjoy. Well, Dan, I want to start by saying thank you so much for, firstly, your patience, because we tried to do this yesterday and my computer basically took a shit. So we had to reschedule and do it today. So I want to thank you again for coming on the Behind the Shield podcast.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for having me. Super excited to do it. And, my sons, my oldest son, he met you at the 343. And I told him I was doing a podcast. And he was like, is that the guy that interviewed James Brolin? And I was like, yeah. And because of you, my kids think I'm like some type of famous person. But I told him, I'm like, nobody knows who I am. So it's okay. But I appreciate it. You're pumping me already.
Well, that was so cool. We'll circle around to it again. But this last year, I've done the 343. I think this was the 11th year, if I'm not mistaken. And you did it with your son. Dave Coughlin did it with his son. So, 10 plus years ago, we were doing it and then we were losing a lot of people. And obviously there was a very poignant backstory to, the bonus squads and all those kind of things. But it was so cool this year to see these firefighters that kind of walk the walk with their own fitness. Now, especially Dave, my God, his freaking athletic phenom that he and his wife have spawned. It was just so great to see.
No, and it was fun too, because it's like, when we first started doing the event years ago, Chief Seagrass and Tony Willis, they were big, as far as to kind of getting the initial groundwork laid for us. And, when both of them left, they kind of said the same thing. It's like, it's on you guys to keep it going. And so, Dave and Doss and then now Belinda, they've just taken the ball and ran with it. And so it is a lot of work behind the scenes. I mean, I don't think anybody that comes in just for the one day realizes like it's a buildup from like normally like in a perfect world, if they could start it in like April, that would be great. But I mean, logistically speaking, it's like crazy trying to get all the things lined up and they got to go sponsors and then getting everything situated with equipment. And they've had so many good, sorry, buddy. Oh, yeah, I've got my son walking in here.
No, you're fine.
But they've had so many good like local CrossFit gyms that have, came out over the years and not only compete, but also, donate their equipment for the day. So we're able to kind of have everything set up. So it's just crazy to see how much it's grown over the years.
Yeah. Well, this year we were at the brand new Orange County training facility. So we'll circle around with that. But that was really cool to actually do it in, towers and all these places with burn buildings everywhere and USAR props and, so I'm excited to hear the kind of backstory of that. But without jumping ahead too much, to start at the very beginning of your story. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings?
Yeah, well, so born in Fort Lauderdale. My dad and my mom were both originally from New England. My dad's from Boston, busy town. My mom's from a small town in Connecticut called Tolland. you probably don't even know where that is. Nobody really does. But funny how they met. So my dad grew up in Waltham, Massachusetts, and that is where the band Aerosmith kind of started. And so they used to play at a place called Mo Black's. And, he would go there and he would check them out. And then on a family vacation, my dad met a kid and they became pen pals. Now, for the younger people, pen pals is this actually a thing where you'd meet somebody, you exchange addresses, and then you would write letters to each other. That's kind of how you kept in touch. So
like Snapchat, but
he got a random letter. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is like people are so used to getting like phone calls. And if you don't get an immediate response, people get, kind of annoyed by it. But, back then you could reach out to somebody and not hear from them for months. So my dad randomly got a letter in the mail from a girl probably 2 years later from Tallinn. And that's where this kid was from. And he had given the info to my dad. And my mom, beautiful girl growing up, and sent a picture. And she's like, hey, this guy told me that Aerosmith, and I'd really like to come out there and meet them and da-da-da. So they ended up striking up, letters back and forth. And that's kind of how they met. And then she was a senior in high school. My dad was a little bit older. In 77, he decided to give Florida a try. So back then, everybody in the Northeast, they all hate the winters. And Florida was like, back then, like the place to be. It was kind of like, to like go down there and be wild or whatever. So my dad started off driving oil trucks in Boston at 15 years old, and they would go to like gas stations, pick up waste oil. And so he ended up buying his own truck and said, I'm going to give Florida, a year and see how I like it. And if it doesn't work out, I'll come back. And then he never came back. And so he left. And then shortly after, my mom decided to drop out of high school, like 2 months before graduation, and followed him down there. And and he always says, he's like, I never invited her. She just came down and ruined the party. But so they ended up settling in Fort Lauderdale, Broward area. And I was born in 1983. And then a few years later, my sister was born in 86. And then by 89, 90, they got divorced. And so, coming from that background, obviously it's a little different from having parents separated, living with my mom mostly, and then we bounced back and forth. And, at that point, my dad he was probably working 60, 80 hours a week. But during that time, he actually had a plan of becoming a fireman. And so he went to state standards, went through everything. He got first in his class. But during that time, it was just competitive market to get hired, right? Like you would put in an application and sometimes you'd hear nothing. And then about 6 years after he had applied, a department called him, but by that point he was making too much money in his current job that he ended up, just sticking with what he was doing.
What year was that he was testing?
It was probably like 88, 89. Yeah.
This is what's crazy, because obviously people think that there was a big, like boom in the fire service in, post 9/11. That's when I came into the fire service. But when you hear like the 90s, the 80s, it was super, super competitive. And I'm sure we'll get to this. But
oh yeah,
then you look at recruitment today and it's just, an absolute shadow of what it was. And
completely different.
There's 100% there are ways to bring it back. But people will say to me with the 24/72, but yeah, then you're just going to steal firefighters from other people. And it's like, no, the rising tide lifts all ships. If we all start changing the way we work, young people will want to do this job again. And then you will go back to what we had for so many decades, which was highly competitive lists that you took the top, 10, 15, 20% from.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's one of those things where I was a senior in high school in 9/11, didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. I just knew I wasn't ready to go to college because I was a nut. So I ended up joining the service, and my dad had told me, he goes, well, the good thing about being in the military for, public service jobs is you either can get hired if you know somebody or if you have military service, because, you get veterans preference. So when I was active duty, my dad, unbeknownst to me, he didn't want me coming home when I got out and just doing nothing. So he went and signed me up for state standards and EMT school without me knowing. So as soon as I got home, he's like, you're going to do this. And I was like, all right. And I did EMT school. It took me 3 times to pass it because I'm not very smart. And I just I didn't really like the medical side initially, even though that's like 90% of what we do. But as soon as I went to standards, that's when I kind of fell in love with what the job was. And I was like, okay, it's got the same structure, military style, rank structure and all that. So, and getting yelled at that point was kind of common. So I wasn't, shook by it. But same thing when I was trying to get hired in South Florida. And obviously back then they were doing the transition where you had to basically be a medic to get hired. And when I was at Broward Fire Academy, they told me, look, go get hired up in Orange County. They'll take you right away as an EMT, get your experience, and then come back down here. So I was like, all right. So ended up coming up to Orange County, and it was still a competitive process. There was 30 spots. This is like right around 2007. So like we're on the wave of the economic collapse. Like it's getting ready to really get bad. And I ended up fortunately getting a job, which worked out well because I just had my son. He was 6 months old, and I'm sitting here like feeling like a loser. I'm like, oh, I got to figure something out. And I fell in love with the Central Florida area. It was a lot cheaper to live. The pay wasn't great. It was, I think when I got hired, I was started at like $13.39 an hour. Which, I mean, if you look at inflation, it's definitely going way faster than the pay has ever gone. But I was happy with the career choice, and I started out at Station 63, and the guys there were all awesome. I mean, we stuck together for probably 5 years, which nowadays is uncommon. It seems like there's so much movement, at least in our department, which I'm sure it's like that in a lot of places where you don't have crews that stick together that long and they're floating and everything else. But that time frame, it was different. I mean, it was all competitive, and you had a lot of the older generation, which when they got hired, this was a career. People would stick around for 30 years. And it's like nowadays, I mean, these kids, and I say kids, I mean, I'm only 42, but there's so many other ways you can make money. I mean, shit, you can sell feet picks, it's like if you're riding a rescue in Pine Hills area up all night, I'm sure they start thinking, man, maybe I'll do something else. So it's like, how do you navigate kind of the next generation and the different opportunities that they have to get them to stay here? And I know you brought up the 24/72, and you're a big advocate for it. And that's definitely going to be the big thing, because the beauty of this job is that if you can have a schedule where you're working 7 to 10 days a month and you can still have some type of business on the outside, then you have the best of both worlds. But this job was never designed to be your primary, like everyday thing where you're constantly exposing yourself to whether it's the fires or the PTSD and the medical side of it. I mean, you're running just the volume of calls now that they weren't running back then.
When you were in the school ages, because when we do the 343, you're obviously usually on the podium. You're a phenomenal athlete. What were you playing and doing back then when you were a young man?
Well, it's funny because like the people that know me now, they never knew like me when I was a kid, and thank God there was no social media. But I mean, back then, I was smoking cigarettes. I was being a knucklehead. But after 9/11 happened, at least for me, that's kind of when things changed, where I was like, all right, I want to do something with my life. Like most of my family, both my grandfathers were in the military. My dad's father was a jump master during the Korean War. My aunt was a corpsman. My uncle was a avionics guy in the Air Force. My other uncle was in the Navy, and he's actually just retired from Waltham Fire Department up north. But I kind of, at 18, you never know what you want to do. So it was just kind of like, well, maybe I'll go into kind of the same path as those people, because all my family, they're pretty successful. Shit, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
We were talking about what sports and exercise you did.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I grew up playing football, all that stuff, but baseball. And then when I hit high school, I wanted to chase girls. So the practice was getting in the way, and then I just started doing that. And I mean, to this day, I regret it because I was pretty good at baseball. I never had the size for football, but I always had the kind of that background. And then once I went to basic training, and that kind of, and anybody that doesn't know what they want to do with their life or needs, like when you're young, you got to kind of look at yourself and go, am I doing everything I can, or do I need a push? And so basic training for me was the push. When I went in there, it was like they reprogrammed me just because of my background. Like, my mom, I know we're kind of going all over the place, but so my mom, she's struggled with substance abuse most of her life. My sister, who actually passed away from an overdose 15 years ago, kind of same thing, same family history with that. And so growing up and watching that, I knew like what that road looked like. And I knew that some of the people that I was hanging out with were going down that road. And I knew I did not want to continue down that path because I saw where it went. So that was kind of me looking at the military. Is like, let me get out of here for a few years and figure my own life out. And the good thing is, like, anytime you put yourself in the room with people that are already doing what you want to do, that's infectious. You know, like you get around good people, then you start kind of going down that same path. So, I mean, I wouldn't be here today if I didn't have a lot of the good mentors I had between the military and in the fire service. I mean, most of the guys that are looked at as like the legends in the fire service, I latched onto those guys as much as I could just to pull what I could. And then obviously now I'm at the state of my career where now it's time for me to give it back.
Both the books really, but certainly the most recent one I wrote, the multi-generational trauma is a big part of it, to really show, look, this is, not just your childhood, your parents' childhood, your grandparents' childhood, but it's not doom and gloom. When you identify that these dominoes are falling, you yourself can look in the mirror and go, okay, what do I need to do? And I think that mentorship is a big part. With the ACEs score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score, we on average have kind of an ACEs of about 6 out of 10, as do incarcerated personnel, men and women. So if you think about that, we find ourselves at the same crossroads. One finds a drug dealer as a mentor, one finds a military member as a mentor, and then off we go on different paths. But it's the same thing. Yeah. Unaddressed trauma is unaddressed trauma.
Oh yeah. When I was a kid, I didn't realize it. I don't think anybody does at that age, but by the time I was turning 18, I got a little bit of trouble. That's when I realized I was like, all right, I got to get out of here. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because I never realized until looking back, but my first experience where I actually helped somebody, I was 18 years old, getting ready to graduate, about a month before. Me and my friends were driving out of my neighborhood out of Cooper City, and they just started widening the Griffin Road Canal. And as we're pulling out, a car is coming down. They kind of changed the way the road went. Normally it was just kind of a straight shot, but they started putting Jersey barriers up and they were like changing the path of the road. So we're pulling in, we're getting ready to turn left, and we watch a X5 BMW drive into the canal, and nobody else is on the road. So my friends, I'm like, pull up to the shoreline. I strip down to my underwear. I end up getting a glass punch from my friend. I jump in there. I pull the lady out of the car, and then I vomited all over the place afterwards from the adrenaline dump. But I remember that first experience being like, all right, that was kind of cool. I wonder if there's more that I could do with that. And that kind of pivoted me towards the military. And then 2 weeks after that, then I ended up getting arrested for something at a prom where I drank. And then, the cops were saying they were going to arrest me. I ended up running from the cops. And then I pooped my pants. And then I went to county for a night. It was a whole crazy story. But that was kind of the switch of like, all right, I did something really good. And then right after that, I did something really bad. And then it's like, do I really want my life to go down that path? And after going one night in jail, I was like, okay, I'm not going that path.
That's the point. That's a human being, isn't it? And this is what was so crazy. Yeah. It's funny you talk about Griffin. My wife was at Nova Southeastern in med school for the last 4 years. So 3.5 years, I was driving down Griffin to go see her. So I can see exactly the canal you're talking about. Yeah. But when I did the fire team test, I think it was called, where they do one test and they give it to all the different departments. Miami Beach.
Oh yeah, it was the mesh test. Yeah.
Yes, that was it. Miami Beach was there. Yeah. And so they did a pre-app, and I was like on the first app I've ever done for a fire service. And I'm super honest. I'm like, yeah, a long time ago I tried these things, and the dude just crumpled it up and threw it in my face. And I was like, oh, so you're supposed to lie to be a firefighter in America? Got it. Right. And it worked. I mean, I lied every other time. Oh, never tried anything. No, I was too busy at church lighting candles and shit. But you actually think about that though, and I'm being sarcastic for a reason. What the fire service needs is some people that have done some things. It doesn't have to be a criminal past, but have been through some struggles, been through some traumas, ideally worked through them. That's really post-traumatic growth. That's resilience. But that's what gives you the empathy. That's what allows you to work in Pine Hills and Holden Heights and all these areas where, it is a very desperate area, and you can relate to these people that are struggling because you didn't grow up not knowing any trauma, not knowing any struggles. So I
Right.
think it's such a misnomer in, fire service recruitment that they're looking for choir boys and girls, and that's absolute bullshit. A lot of people have
Yeah.
done some things, and that's going to be an asset in uniform.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like when I did my application process, I was honest and I put some stuff down, and then obviously I knew that the arrest thing was going to come up, and it had been expunged, and I had the whole thing there. So the I don't know if Orange County does it now. I'm pretty sure they still do. That back then there was the lie detector, and then you also had to do that psychological. Now I think they've scrapped the psychological, but for the lie detector portion, I went in there, and the guy that was doing it was a Navy vet. So, they only, before they click everything on, he explains it to you. And then me and him like talked a little bit, just kind of get to know each other. And then he's like, all right, you ready to go? And then he flips the thing on. So we end up talking about all that stuff. And it says, all right, you said you used marijuana 3 times, whatever. And then go through the whole thing. But it was the same thing. I'm thinking it's like, if you had somebody that used marijuana 100 times, but they haven't used it since, I mean, everybody goes through these things in life where, like you're saying, it's experimentation. They make mistakes, they learn from it, and you're looking to see, are they still walking this narrow line, or have they gone to the other side? So it's like if you're taking nothing but the best of what you're saying it is, how many people are you truly excluding from the career?
Mm-hmm. Do you end up with that kind of person flying up the career ladder and being an absolute nightmare wearing bugles?
Yeah. Or do they even make it because they don't have that capacity to deal with stressful situations, because the first one they've ever had is this job? Like for me, with a mother who had substance abuse and alcoholism and mental disorders, like when I was a kid, she like locked me and my sister in a bathroom because she thought I was Jesus, and she thought my stepdad was the devil. And then they had to break the door down, and she went away to somewhere, and I didn't see her for 6 months. So it's like, granted, like I'm not mentally affected by it anymore, or I don't even know if necessarily I was. I think I used alcohol and stuff when I was a kid as like a coping mechanism, but I look at it now, and it's like, now when I have that call, I'm able to sit down and talk to the kid that's dealing with that similar situation, and tell them my story and a little snippet of just like, listen, this doesn't have to be your life, and try and give them as much coaching and guidance as you can in that short period of time. But if you have somebody that's never dealt with that, how do you talk to that patient? How do you talk to that family? And it's, at least for me, the experiences of everything I went through as a kid to now have definitely made me better equipped to deal with the stuff we see on a daily basis, because nobody's calling you when things are good in this job. It's always the bad, the worst of the worst. And then how do you respond to it?
Well, what was funny is the 2 things that I'd said I'd tried were, because I hate marijuana, it just didn't work for me at all, were MDMA, basically, when I was in Japan, going to rave clubs,
Okay.
and mushrooms, which were legal, psilocybin. The 2 compounds that we see are helping veterans and first responders with mental health issues. So
yep.
there's the irony.
Well, I read a lot of that stuff too about the psilocybin, where it's supposed to help almost rewire the brain, and helps with PTSD. And you look back at, I read all the crazy conspiracy stuff, MK Ultra and all the other things. I go down the rabbit holes, but one of the things that, one of the conspiracy theories is why they outlawed all that stuff in the beginning, is people were getting so enlightened, and they were starting to push back on things in like the 70s. They were like, ooh, we gotta quiet this down. Let's get the SSRIs and all these other stuff on board, so that way these people aren't thinking about, how we're really rigging the system against them.
Well, we did basically the same hiring process, because I came on in 2008 after coming back from California. So I think my badge number was 16 something. I forget what it was, but
yeah.
And I actually wrote about this in one of my books. Firstly, the psych test. I don't know if you had the same lady. You do the MMPI, which I found out since, with all these conversations with the psychology and psychiatry world, was never meant to be a standalone test in the first place to determine anyone is able to do a job, not to mention a first responder. But secondly, then you talk with the lady in her office where she looked like a pack rat, and you had to move like literally files and files of files to even find somewhere to sit. And I'm like, this is the person that's going to determine if I'm crazy or not. But I think where we've done a massive disservice is these are basically box checking things. A polygraph is another one. Squeeze your butt when you answer the regular questions, and then answer the other ones. You should be fine. Little behind the curtain trick for you. But
Right.
I say that because I ended up being, I would like to say, a good paramedic, a good firefighter. So these barriers were circumnavigated for a reason, for a good reason. But if you have the conversation that at the front door, James Gearing was in a house fire when he was 4, his horrible divorce, another near-death experience. Dan Lennon, has addiction in his family and has all his own trauma. So if you have that conversation like James and Dan, the fact that you are driven to serve, that you want to put a badge on your chest and wear a uniform, tells us that you probably had some things happen. So as much as we're going to do PT, let's start doing the mental health side too. We're going to give you in probation, 6-8 counseling sessions as well, because if you want to grow and be a great firefighter, a great paramedic, working through some of the things that you went through when you were younger is going to create an asset. And we don't do that. We check boxes so that if someone, for whatever reason, doesn't work out, they well, we tested them. It's not
Right.
our problem. So I think it's so backwards because most of us that put the uniform on have had some things happen. And that's not a bad thing unless it is pushed down and locked away. And then, fast forward 10, 15 years in your career, some of our men and women are wondering why they're sitting there with a bottle of whiskey and a pistol.
Yeah. And it's kind of so true just at the fire service in general, right? Like you respond to a call and you react to whatever you see, right? And it seems like no matter what, that bleeds into everything we do, whether it's pre-planning for certain things as far as the hiring stuff, but they're never really pre-planning. They're just waiting to say, oh shit, we have a problem with staffing now and all these people are leaving. So let's do a reactionary thing and do it, right? And that's why, when you talk about 24/72s, I'm a huge advocate for it. Obviously, not just because of the schedule. I think it's a great schedule for mental and physical health, but honestly, recruitment. And if all of these departments locally start doing it first, then as always, we're going to be the last one to convert to it. And by that point, it's too late. Like, why not be the front runner for it and be the one that starts it? And yeah, it's going to pull from other areas, but now it's going to force the local area to do it. And really, they're already doing it anyway. They're going to do it. Kissimmee's already done it. I've heard OFDs talking about it. You have Palm Beach County who's wanting to do it. Fortunately for me, I was in the Air Force Reserves after I got out of active duty down in Miami, and I was a fireman for the DOD. And I have a lot of good connections with a lot of guys that are at all these big departments. And they all tell me, they're like, yeah, we're doing it because we know it's coming. And they're like, we love when Orange County guys come down here because you guys train them so good that we don't really have to do anything for them when they get here. And I'm like, oh, great. Here we go again. And it sucks because it's like, for our department, we have some of the best trainers. We have some of the best special ops guys. I mean, best medics. I mean, all of the people that do our training. And I was fortunate to be a part of that cadre where I did a lot of recruit training. It's awesome to see, and it makes you better. But it's also, after a while, it bogs you down, because when you're watching people that you poured yourself into and you give them everything you got, and then you look at this person and you think, all right, I just trained my replacement. And then they walk out the door to somebody else, for more money, better benefits, or now a schedule change. After a while, you just start feeling like, man, I'm turning my wheels, and that comes at a cost. You're giving up time with your family. Like I live in Volusia County, and I drive an hour to work, and I was doing that every day, Monday through Friday, for almost 5 years to make the department better. But it's like, we got to get something from the other side of it to where it's like, hey, we're going to train them, but you got to retain them.
Absolutely. Well, this is the problem I have with my frustrations in Marion County is we have the Florida State Fire College here. We have a baby making machine, a firefighter baby making machine in our county, and they all go other places. And again, the Marion, kudos to Marion. They have some great people in that department, despite the way that they work, but they're worked into the ground. And it was the same, you and I, when we entered Orange, mandatories were already a thing. And when I became a medic, especially, which I put myself through, they didn't even give me any tuition reimbursement. They're crying for medics. They gave me zero help. Went to medic, Roby, Marion County, went to medic school in Ocala. I come out the other end, and then, I'm just getting hit and hit and hit and hit. But, you basically become a department that, either non-cert trains them from scratch, or, has people come in that have already got their stuff. But yeah, if you're in, 50 or 42 or whatever, your learning curve is so steep that you do end up forging some amazing firefighters. But then, yeah, if you're here in Marion and you hear Gainesville is going to a 42-hour work week that also has, great firefighters and great training, of course you're going to go there.
Right.
And I know Marion, basically it was all but 20 grand per person that they lost. That's how much it cost the department, which means that the taxpayer. So you lose 100 people, which they do in a very short amount of time. That's $2 million that just walked out the back door. So not only, as you said, it's a very valid point. You got these people like Jamal and yourself that are pouring their hearts into these training programs, because the one I had was terrible. 2008, whatever the SOPs were for new hire training, our instructors were so frustrated. But I know now that you've evolved to this incredible training program that you have. But yeah, and then you put all that money, all that time, all that manpower in, and then they go and become an asset in a different department. And that's an insult to the taxpayer who's funded the recruitment and training of that first responder.
Well, and I'm waiting for like the politicians and everybody else to kind of step in, because your job at the admin level and at the political level is that you're supposed to be good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, right? Now, I mean, grant funding, like we've used the SAFER grant for years. And from my understanding, like the SAFER grant, so say if, I hire James and James is here on SAFER grant for 3 years, James ends up leaving after year one. We still have 2 years left on that grant. Now they can apply that money towards a current employee who isn't SAFER grant. So it's almost like a shell game now where you're almost financially vested in getting people to leave, because now you get to offset the cost for your payroll. So it's like maybe there isn't really a benefit to fix it if you have all these SAFER grant employees. Now, I don't know if we got the grant. I don't really pay attention to too much of that stuff anymore. But while I was down there, that was kind of the recurring thing, is like, why fix retention if it's actually helping reduce your payroll costs for existing employees, and then you continue rolling it over.
This is funny because the last person I spoke to about the SAFER grant was recently, and there was a smaller department that, again, one of the guys had reached out talking about the 2472, and he said, and we just secured a SAFER grant. So proactively, what they've done is they've got a SAFER grant that will then help fund the D shift. Now that is, I mean, you can't think of a better investment of taxpayers' money, national taxpayers' money, than to use a SAFER grant to create a fourth shift. Now you've created this recruitment tool. You've got longevity. You're going to reduce, workman's comp claims, accidents. I mean, all the things with this one grant. But like you said, the dark side of that, the abuse of that, is exactly what you're talking about. You're not using it as a training and retention tool at all. You're using it to just move money around.
Yeah, and I mean, the other side of it too is that announcing that you can do a 2472 for a department of our scale is significant, right? So by announcing it, you kick the time frame out, say 2 or 3 years. And with us having a training center now, recruit from the local area specifically, so a lot of these people will leave. Because I know guys that are from Central Florida that left to go to Palm Beach County, that left to go to Miami, that have no family there because the money was better, So it's like, now it's going to be a daunting task, because I was reading something not too long ago where they said in the state of Florida, we're short like over 1,200 firefighters statewide. I know when the consortium was open, they were pumping out roughly 250 a year of certified personnel in the state of Florida. So now with in the Central Florida area. So with the consortium closed, and now Orange County being, now the training facility where we're going to host our own standards, in kind of conjunction with Valencia, I don't really know if that number is going to grow as much. And then you also have like Jay Marquez, who's doing his standards classes out in St. Cloud. But, a lot of these places, I mean, if you're getting 300 a year, but now you're going to increase to the 2472 on top of trying to hire for people that are leaving, people that, retire or whatever, it's like, how are you going to make it? I don't know. And I mean, I saw something that Jay posted, and the state of Florida is, posting how you can get reciprocal certifications if you're a DoD firefighter. But these guys, like, when you come out as a 4-year DoD firefighter, you've got a 7 level, which would basically be, you're basically a supervisor, you've got advanced classes, and you got 4 years experience, plus you're ARF certified, which, most people don't have unless they work at GOA. So why not just make it a lot easier to obtain that state certification instead of having to now come in, challenge these written tests on the, like, why does this guy need to take a test on the fire tetrahedron and like all this garbage that's in these books that, the standards books, to me, it's like, yes, it's kind of a baseline, but it's like when my wife went to nursing school, her first semester, she had to do like the history lesson of Florence Nightingale. Like that has nothing to do with what you're going to do on the floor. And I get it for like a degree program, but we're talking about a certification program. Like I feel like you could do away with that book and just bring people to run calls and teach them the job on the job. I mean, that's where you're learning it. So it's just one of those things where it's like, how do you speed that up? How do you streamline it where now you can get people ready to actually go into the field without having this huge 4-month thing? And then, EMT school is what it is. You got to go through that part of it. But I feel like there's a way to maybe speed this process up, especially with people coming from out of state. I mean, why not start recruiting and giving hiring bonuses and saying, hey, come to the state of Florida, easy reciprocation process to get your cert. And boom, you can come into this department that's 24/72, and we're hiring 450 people.
Well, this is with what's come up. I think it was Gainesville was initially talking about, laterals, because if you look at reciprocity, let's just remove you're going to take, California or Texas firefighters from their department.
Right.
Let's just think about the organic nature of moving around the country. Your wife is in a medical program and she got into Stanford or wherever it is. How many firefighters just simply need to work in a different state because of the family dynamic? So it goes both ways. So I think making reciprocity exactly what you're talking about, whether it's out of the military, whether it's different states. And then, yes, of course, you have your own department-specific orientation academy, and then you have a probation. Because just because you're in a DOD doesn't mean that you're not a turd. So you still have that ability to filter out the chaff, as it were. But the other thing, someone told me that and this doesn't surprise me, actually, if it is this amount, that 30% of certified Florida firefighters are not working in the fire service. So whether they were, recently or further ago. So firstly, I've always said this, like mine's expired now. But do you think if I went to an engine now, I'd be like, well, I don't know how to pull a transverse anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the people that have been out for a bit, again, department-specific orientation. I mean, I got hired in California after being trained in Florida. And you talk about, throwing the deep end. And I got guys doing high shoulder throw sticks and then doing building construction and vertical ventilation cuts on panelized roof. And I'm like, well, they just showed us to push it against a wall and then walk it up. And then we cut on a pallet. I mean, I was so undertrained for truck company operations in standards here. But you know what? You put your big boy pants on and you're like, all right, well, I better fucking hurry up and learn this shit then.
Right.
So there are so many different ways that we can start pulling people. And then once that demand grows, the academies will be full. And then, what's going to happen? If there's a huge demand for the fire service, other academies will probably start popping up as well, whether, like you said, within a department or putting on an extra class. So they managed to train so many of us that there were thousands testing for a few spots in the past. Then, what's going to happen is we'll go back to that again, whatever that dynamic looked like 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the other side of it too is just the volume of calls, like Orange County, I think we ran last year 142,000. And in 2008, it was like 93,000. So it's like, that is a huge jump. And yeah, we've increased a little bit, but I mean, 4-man engines, okay. And then we're 45 stations. And I think back when we got hired, it was like 42. So you're talking about, a couple extra stations, 29 closed, gave that to Apopka. But we're the largest department in Central Florida. Now we're also running mutual aid calls into the city of Orlando and Ocoee and Winter Garden. So we're supplementing their departments as well. It's like, if you're on for a 24-hour period and then you get mandatory for a 48, you're talking about that much more exposure, running your ass off. I mean, something's got to give at some point, And I have these talks sometimes. Like, I have the deputy chief's son at my station, and he's very open about talking all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, it's how it's always been. But I don't know if it's not necessarily a disconnect, but I mean, as well as I do, like after a while you get removed from something, you forget certain things, and the way it was isn't the way it is now. Like recruiting back then, you didn't have to do it. You had 30 applicants or you had 30 spots and 500 applicants. Now you're literally giving anybody and everybody walking through the door an opportunity to get this job. Like I wish I was getting hired now because I would have never paid for my own standards and my own EMT. I would have came on and had a guaranteed job and got paid for a year. Most of the people I know, everybody paid their own way. Everybody had to figure it out. Like, and if you had to do the longer version where it was a schedule that you could still work full time and you have a family and then do your standards on the weekends like my dad did, it'd take you like 6 months to do it. Like now they've sped it up, but it's not because they're doing it because they want to help people out. They're doing it because they have to.
Yeah, I was working full time at a publishing company right outside SeaWorld, and going working out on my lunch hour, going to school 3 nights a week, and then 1 weekend day as well. So that was a 9-month EMT and then fire. So and again, I'm all for non-cert, but again, it has to be competitive. And I think the mentorship programs are amazing, like actually going into the underserved communities and finding the great firefighters that aren't represented very well. But if you just dragnet as they're doing now, like high school kids, one of my son's like childhood friends' mothers, we just bumped into her in the grocery store here. They started off with a program that they were just going to take, I forget what it was, like the top 15 kids or something. They ended up taking all the kids. So, these are 18-year-old kids, which I'm opposed to. I think that's too young to be going into Pine Hills, Holden, like you said, 56, 80 hours a week, just getting absolutely destroyed with all the horrible shit that we see. Versus, like the FDNY does, or they certainly used to, like law enforcement does, wait until you're 21, having explorer programs and all that kind of stuff. But being in the meat grinder, waiting until the brain is developed so that you can start to actually deal with the sleep deprivation and the trauma and the exposures, like you said. But I think we're doing a massive disservice. And then you put in hiring bonuses. You tell us, 15, 20 years ago that in the future, they'll be so desperate for firefighters that they'll offer them $15,000, $20,000 hiring bonus. We would have laughed in your face. So my thing is, I don't understand why the fire service isn't searching the ends of the earth to reverse this crisis, why our national union isn't acknowledging it, what actually needs to happen as far as the work week. So it is incredible, but it's so great to see that Florida is now really the nucleus of this kind of, the solution, the first step. It's not the only thing, but to see 10 departments and St. John's as we speak now and negotiate, and I hope to God that they are able to push the needle in their department. But yeah, as you mentioned, behind the curtain, there's a lot of departments that are going to be going to this because they see that this is a solution. And then if we can be a beacon as a state of Florida, what's the ripple effect going to be for the rest of the country then? And we can help our entire profession of brothers and sisters and their families for decades and decades to come.
Yeah, I mean, 24/72 is really the only way I think that's going to get the recruitment up. And I think there's also things like, at least at the local level, like when I was in the military and I was getting out, they always had, like, if you're going to transition back to civilian life, then why not have something that you have a partnership with, like military, that, hey, okay, I have X amount of people that are going to come to Central Florida. Hey, they want to become firefighters. How can we start that process now where they're 6 months before they get out? All right, perfect. Boom. Let them go. As soon as they're off their military orders and they're out, roll right into it. So it's like, there's got to be different ways that they can get creative to do it. Again, that's head and shoulders above of what I'm doing. But, it's one of those things where when you take people and you give them something for free, they're not truly invested into it. Like when I paid for my own standards and I paid for my own classes, like I was financially invested into it and time invested into it. When you give somebody an opportunity and they just got to pass this CPAT test, which, all of us can just walk through it. It's kind of a joke, and then take a written test. And basically they know that you guys are short. Like I remember one recruit said, you guys need me more than I need you. Literally, a guy that was trying to get a job for us told us that. And sure enough, he's right. Like we're bleeding people. So when you give things away, what's the quality of the applicant you're getting? Like how do you make it more competitive? And 100% right. The best schedule, 24/72, hiring bonuses. And now you're going to start bringing those people in that are going to be quality applicants. And I'm not talking bad on anybody that we hire or anybody I know. I'm just saying in general, because I would bet if we pulled the metrics on discipline in the last 5 years, it's probably gone up a little bit higher than what it was, 25 years previously when you had people who were coming in because you had the pick of the litter, like OFD. I tested for them when I had a year on, and there was 350 people there, and they were hiring 10 people. Imagine as a employer where you have this huge pool of people to pick from, you get to be selective. But now it's like, oh, we just got to put asses in the seats, bring them all in. Let's go. You got a job.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's crazy because, I mean, people talk about, oh, we don't have the money for this. And as you mentioned, no one said you got to do it in a fiscal year either, make the transition. But I know Marion, their overtime alone is like 5 million at the moment. And then you add the lack of retention, which of course they're not going to declare, add another couple of million there. So you're telling me, because we're a small county, really, if you look at the number of people, that over, 3 years, you can't transition to hiring a D shift and making all that lack of, the wasted overtime and the retention costs go away, not to mention a healthier department, which will bring down, workman's comp claims. But Orange, I mean, I would imagine it's multiple times that. So you've got, again, the lack of retention, especially if you're doing non-cert programs all the time. You've got the overtime costs. The money is already there. And then to underline your point, one of my guests recently said that on average, and this is on the law enforcement side, it costs $1 million. Excuse me, let me start again. It costs $500,000 to get rid of one bad employee, because usually that's the one that's going to have the kind of fake workman's comp claim, that they're in there for all the wrong reasons. So he said, think about that. For every time that you lower the bar, the probability that you're going to have an employee that's going to cost you a lot of money, whether it's mistakes in a lawsuit, whether it's fake workman's comp claims, you've got to factor that in as well. So now we're talking about tens and tens of millions of dollars that you can proactively save by staffing your fire department properly. Not to mention, in my opinion, the most important thing, that you have men and women that actually go home to their fucking families when they're supposed to, not get a phone call at 7 a.m, say, hey, because we're so awful at running a fire department, you have to pay the price and stay another 24 hours.
Yeah, and they don't even give you phone calls anymore. Now you just get a telestaff automated text that says, yeah, you've been popped for mandatory for the next 24 hours at this location.
Really?
So it's it's even gotten more impersonal than it used to be, So, but, it's just one of those things too. I'm starting to look at it now. Like I've got going on 18 years and like I've literally witnessed just like this transition of where it was highly competitive and, it was like, if you got hired, like that meant you were the best of the best, to where now it's kind of just watered down to exceptions are made for somebody because we just need to get them in. I've done recruit testing when they were testing out, and prior to like when Chief Perigo was there, Chief Perigo was one of those guys like, this is the standard. Like we wrote all the tests and rewrote everything for when they tested at orientation. And then, it seemed like after they moved him out of there, the standard that he kind of had set started to kind of backtrack a little bit. And, when you have a training team telling you, hey, get them through, what do? You can't buck the system in that sense, and it's just then once you set that, once you continue to move that goalpost, all of a sudden within a couple of years, now if your standard line was here, now you're all the way over here. And, now you get the emails about talk to your crews about their driving, talk to your crews about talking to patients. Oh, this person's got to go for an investigation. This person got popped on a drug test. Like you see the recurrence of all that stuff. And it seems like it's gone up, but that's what you get. That's what you get when you've just made it your priority just to fill the seats.
You mentioned about being a smoker and then getting into the military. What has been the evolution of your own strength and conditioning journey, and then what's your perspective on punitive fitness standards in the fire service?
So when I was in the military, I was still smoking when I still had to do all my running and everything else. And shout out to Pete Hegseth for actually bringing the standards back to the military, because I got a lot of friends that are getting ready to retire, and like the last couple of years, they said it was unbelievable like what they were allowing. Like normally you have what's called worldwide deployable. And if you couldn't pass your standard fit test for the year, you were not deployable and you would go on the Fat Boy program. That's what they called it. It wasn't a nice thing. They wanted to shame you to make sure that you would want to get off that thing. And you would be on that program where you were mandated to work out every single day and until you can beat the standard. Similar, like with us, we have that IPAT that you have to do once every 2 years. And, I was heavily involved with peer fitness, and I've seen plenty of people anywhere from the firefighter rank up to the lieutenant rank who sometimes didn't pass it. And then they would just go back on duty. It's like, if you're saying this test is contractual and you have to pass it to be combat ready, how is this person still on duty? And then how do you fix that? And then obviously when you have the union involved and all this other stuff, it gets a little muddy with that. But, at the end of the day, like, we talk about insurance costs for the department. You talk about really what we're supposed to be here for is to serve the public. If you're not able to pass a simple test and you can't get off the Stairmaster, then there's things that need to be addressed. And if you're not going to hold yourself accountable, then your organization should be. But again, it's one of those things where you need people in the seats, and now it creates a hole and a vacancy. So how do you fix it? And I mean, honestly, it has to be one of those things where they develop something where you pull somebody off duty. Because once you've been on a schedule of 24 and 48, and you're used to having your days off, and now all of a sudden you got to drive down there 5 days a week, and they put you on days to be on the Fat Boy program, I'm pretty sure you're going to start to get motivated to be in shape and hopefully stay in shape after that. But again, that takes leadership to do it. I just don't know if they're willing to do it.
I was 70 and John Byrne was my lieutenant. So he would go do the iPad in flip-flops and then light up a cigarette the moment he was done. So, yeah.
Listen, my first fire ever, John Byrne was working in overtime on engine 63. We're apartment fire. And then back then, they don't really do it that much now, but they'd set up the tents, what's his name? Larry Dunn was the one riding rehab, and he would set everything up for you. And then you have to get your blood pressure. And so John Byrne's sitting there, he's got his blood pressure cuff on, he's smoking his cigarette. And then he looks at me and he goes, 120/80. And sure as shit, the thing pops up on the monitor. And I'm like, damn, this guy's a badass.
He was an anomaly.
Again, yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys, but again, like, if you could do the job and you could pass at least the minimum standard, that's fine. But if there's no accountability for the minimum standard, then what are we doing here? Why are we even taking the test at this point?
Well, what was cool is kind of one of those build it, they will come. When I first got to 70, I started doing CrossFit and I was just on my own, and people would come out and laugh or whatever, and then go back in the station. But slowly but surely, I'd get someone. I think it was Mike. Was it Ryan or Chang? One of those two were the first ones to join me. This is Ryan, maybe. But then by the end of it, the whole station, the whole station were working out. And John he loved the rower. He'd be on the rower all the time. So and then he switched. He was a big Mountain Dew guy, and he's a diet Mountain Dew. So even then, there's little changes to make him a little bit healthier. I think he was even trying to taper off his cigarettes a bit. But that's the point is, it's not like, oh, this person can't do it, just take their job. It's like, right, they've got away from where they should be. And again, the work week is absolutely a big part of that. How can we just get them back to where they need to be? But what drives me crazy is when unions oppose fitness standards, because the fitness standards are what are going to the thing that's keeping our people healthy. It's going to create a healthy retirement, longevity. So if you're opposing fitness standards, not only are you spitting in the face of the people that we're supposed to be serving, but you're also spitting in the face of the people that are wearing the uniform. Because at the front door, as I always say, it was called minimum standards. This is the shittiest you should ever be. And to then push against those standards that we had to be held to in the fire academy and say it's not fair is the biggest, the most glaring aspect of cowardice, in my opinion. If you're a union and you're in charge of the people, the well-being of the people that you serve, that are paying the union dues, a fitness standards should be fucking front and center, and so should a healthy work week. And those are the two things that I haven't seen anyone move towards until very, very, very recently. So what the fuck are we paying for? $1 pay raise? That what is that? That's not helping anyone. It's the actual environment that creates performance and longevity that we need to focus on.
Yeah, and when I was briefly the union secretary, that was something I had brought up. And when I brought it up, I kind of got a little pushback, and even one of the officers had said, well, Dan, not everybody's like you. And I'm like, listen, I didn't roll out of bed like this. You know what I mean? Like, I this is 20 years of consistency. And so it's like, how do you get somebody to turn that switch on? I mean, at least in the fire service, incentives work. So why not have it where, like, instead of this, and the thing that fucking drives me crazy about the fire department is that I could be a stellar employee with 5 years on, and then the other guy could be the biggest piece of shit with 15 years on, and he's always going to make more than me because he's just been here longer. It's like, why not make it competitive while you're here and create a system where you can make more than that guy because you're just doing all these extra other things, like it just doesn't make any sense to me. You're not incentivizing the younger guy to try, and you're almost validating the laziness of the older guy who does nothing anyway. And now it's just, wait around. I've been here 20 years, so I get mine and I don't have to do nothing for it, but back to your question with like where my fitness started. So I brought up, like, I got arrested. And so when I got the police report back, I remember I was reading through it and it said body type and, fat, muscular, skinny. And in my mind, I was 130 pounds. I never really worked out, and I just kind of got lazy. And I'm like, you see my son, like he's just, like little slim guy. He lifts and everything. But, I didn't really know too much about fitness, didn't really eat a whole lot other than like Marie calendars out of the refrigerator. And they checked the box skinny. And something went off in my head. Like, it was like my image of myself isn't what is actually being put on here. And I was like, all right, I'm going to the gym. So I ended up meeting up with a kid that summer. His name was Mike Bowden. I went to high school with him, and he used to work out at the Bally's down the street. And the kid's jack dude, played hockey. And he just took me under his wing, and he told me, eat 3 peanut butter sandwiches a day and 3 glasses of milk on top of all your other meals. And then I started taking like Animal Pack, which is like a bunch of aminos and everything. And all I did was go in and I lifted with him the whole summer. That summer I went from 135 to like 165. And so immediately everybody's like, you're taking, it was a quick jump. So obviously, like, my body needed the nutrition and everything else. And everybody thought I was on juice and all this other stuff. I'm like, no, I'm actually just working out. Then I went to basic training, and then like my cardio got real good with the running, and I've always been able to run. And then it just picked up from there. And so for those few years when I was active, I was kind of just doing the standard, bench press on Monday, back on Tuesday, probably skip legs Wednesday, arms on Thursday, abs, and then rinse and repeat. And then when I was deployed in 2007, a good friend of mine, Jason Lord, he was 10 years older than me. He always used to call me his little brother. And he introduced me to CrossFit. And that's when I realized like how out of shape I think I really was. And by the end of that deployment, I came back and I did the CPAT for Orange County, and I blew it out of the water. And I remember Kenny Flanders, before I took the test, he's like, oh, I've never seen you at mentoring before. And I'm like, no, yeah, I live in South Florida. I'm not driving all the way up here for this. And he goes, oh, well, not many people can pass this test if they've never done it. And I was like, oh, okay. So back then, Chief Plogger, he used to sit in a scissor lift above the curtain and watch the recruit, the potential guys go. And I think I got like a 6-minute CPAT. Like I was just blowing through it. And afterwards, I handed Kenny Flanders my time, and he goes, huh. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I did all right, huh? And that was it. And then back then, I guess Chief Plogger, he wanted people who were physically fit. He was like not really big into EMS. He was like a straight fireman, fire chief. And he was also in the Air Force. So I think that like at least kind of helped move the needle with me getting hired. But it's like, how do we get back to that standard? Like we had Chief Seagrass running the wellness department for years. And we had John Sabat and then, Tony Willis after him who really kept it going. And, the guys that are there are doing great, but I think it's just, you get a lot of the political stuff in between that kind of bogs the system down. And it's like, we need to get back to that. And the good thing is we've done a good job with mental health. Like Claudia Fernandez and her team have done phenomenal with the mental health stuff that we do for training. Dave Coughlin's a part of that. And we're definitely getting better on that aspect, but it's like, all right, now we've gone, head and shoulders, further with that, but now we got to get back to taking care of the body at the same time. Because again, out of shape people, a higher instance of getting hurt. Now they're out of the field, they're on light duty, and now you got to plug those holes with overtime, and that just bogs down your workforce. So it's a collaboration, but until you have people in all those positions willing to make it a priority, it won't be.
Yeah. And even, again, healthy body, healthy mind. If you listen to a lot of people that have been through the crucible, one of my closing questions is, what do you do to decompress? It's nearly always the gym, walking my dog. It's exercise, it's staying healthy. So if you want to improve mental health, improve physical health too. And that's again back to the standards, hiring standards, maintaining standards. Before we go to, because I really want to dive into kind of like the entrepreneurial side, the second career, as it were. When you look back over the 18 years, what were some of the what you call career calls that you've had in Orange County?
Well, EMS wise, I mean, there's always a few, but like I would say one that there's two that kind of bother me and that I still think about. It's not like I wake up or anything, but it's always like, when you start talking about stuff, that's a story that's always at the front of my brain. One of them was Thanksgiving time frame. This lady, she used to tell us she was a frequent caller. She used to tell us she was a retired New York firefighter, and she lived with her parents and everything else. And her and her mom got in a fight, and we show up on scene, and the mom got ran over by the F-150 in the driveway. And this is on Thanksgiving morning, like 9 o'clock in the morning. So come to find out, like her and her mom had an argument. Her mom went and just like sat out in the driveway, and the daughter didn't see her. And the daughter was like, I'm just going to go for a drive and cool off, threw it in reverse and ran her mother over. Complete accident. She was devastated. And that was just always one of those things that I was like, oh my God, how would that make you feel? And like trying to console somebody like that. It's like, I wish I had the words. Now, if you ever talk to Diane Alexander, she's out doing a lot of great teaching on that, as far as like how to talk to somebody in those moments. Cause you get like that first 5 minutes, and it's more so just being a good listener. And I think being a good listener to those people, and not saying everything's going to be all right, or, I'm sorry for your loss. Like those are the common things we always say to each other. So, it's having that tool to actually converse with somebody in the worst possible moment. And another call me and Nelson Bagan, my medic, had not too long ago, went to a drug house, walk into the house, and it was for a lady who's having a baby. So we walk in, there's a back turned towards me. She's smoking a cigarette, and we're like, are we here for you? And, she looks over like if I say crackhead, typical missing teeth, like, skinny. And she's like, yeah, get this off of me. And I look down, and she's literally got a fetus attached to her still. And it's probably 2-3 months old. Like the body's still transparent, and the baby's guppy breathing. And we're just like, oh my God. So we end up loading up, transporting mom and her to Winter Park. And I've got a guy who's got like 2 shifts on with us. We get to the hospital because I give my guys, I give them a rider. We end up going to the hospital. I walk in, the probie is holding the infant and like just doing blow by. The staff doesn't know what to do. And we're literally all just standing there like, are you guys going to like make a decision? And then they just said, well, we're just going to let it die. You know what I mean? So now it's like, I'm looking at this poor kid who's got 2 shifts on thinking, how is he processing this? Like for us, like after a while, you kind of just, you get numb with it. And, between whatever your religion is or whatever, like I've kind of just taken it as like, God gives everybody free will, and things happen that are beyond explanation. And there's sometimes no way to make sense of it, so you just, that's how I move on from it. But for some of these kids that have never seen any of this stuff, and that's your first call, like, how are you gonna process that and deal with it? And what do we do afterwards? At least with our department, now they have the peer support team that can come out and talk to people and do all that. Where 15 years ago they'd be like, "Oh, don't be a pussy," whatever. Like, get over it. So it's at least that's moving in that direction. Fire-wise, probably the call that stands out the most is I was a fireman on Truck 30. Jimmy Berry, definitely like living legend these days in our department. He's a lot of the reason why I stayed in the fire service, because I transferred out of 63 and went to 30, and I was like this close to leaving just because I had my original crew kind of all started going their separate ways, and the crew that came in there was fine, but it was like I was stuck on the rescue every shift and running to the hospital 15 times. I was like, I watch Backdraft. This isn't what I got into this for. Like, I want to be on a fire truck. This is bullshit. So I ended up going over to 30, and I was going over there doing command tech for a while, and I saw kind of the dynamic there. And it was like 30 is one of those stations, kind of like a 51 or a 42, big kitchen table, everybody's sitting around, and it just feels like a firehouse. Not every fire department or every fire station is like that, but that station, when I was there, I was like, all right, this is what I signed up for. So as soon as I got there, I got my truck stuff. I learned a shit ton of stuff from Jimmy, Jeff Hansen, and Trevor Jones, who was my lieutenant for a long time there, and that's where I kind of fell back in love with the fire service. And we get an apartment fire call en route. They're saying multiple callers, right? So like we all know, like if it's single caller, nothing showing, blah blah blah, like it's bullshit. When you hear multiple callers, fire out the windows, all that shit, you're like, all right, it's go time. So we show up, Rescue 40, who's with Kyle Onkus and Rebel. They pull up, they give a good arrival report. They say there's a lady hanging out of a window. So by that point, we got Chief Morrow, who's coming behind us. Jimmy passes command to him, sees the lady hanging out of the window, and he's like, truck 30, pass command, deploying for a rescue. And so me and him go up. The fire was on the second story. The lady was on the third story. The front door was open. I guess some kids, later on, we found out they started a mattress fire playing with, a lighter, and then they ran away and the mom took off with them. So from our vantage point, if we're on the A side, we didn't realize that on the C side, the window had already vented and it was crawling up the side of the building and it caught the decking on fire. So Jimmy and I go up. On the way up, I hit the second floor with a can real quick and close the door. Jimmy's like, hey, I'm going to go after her. Go ahead and go to the other side and search. Because as we were pulling up, masking up, somebody said a lady and a baby were on the other apartment on the other side. So Jimmy forces that door. I force that door. Jimmy gets the lady. She runs down the stairs, and then he comes to find me. We search that apartment. The only thing we found there was a shit ton of weed sitting on the table, and then we end up coming back out. And as soon as we walk out, that whole deck is on fire, and we're like, "Oh shit!" And then Lenny has truck 30's bucket like at the decking. So Jimmy's like, well, what do you got left in that can? So I just shot it as much as I could, and we just ran the hell out of there. And that was like the first call that I'd ever had where like there was that much of an element of like a person hanging out of a window. Shit's getting serious. We don't have a bunch of units on scene. It was just the truck and a rescue, and it was like, go, right? That's the time to be reactionary is when you have that stuff. You got 30 seconds or less to make a decision. But, that one call, I always talk about it, but it's funny how, like Greg Hubbard used to talk about and Ralph Astorita about the Rolodex that builds in your mind over the course of your career. It's like every call I go on, I always pull from those experiences now where, it just speeds the process up. So, but yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite calls was with Jimmy. And anytime I talked to him, he's always like, yeah, that was probably the one that, I actually got the pucker effect a little bit.
Yeah, actually, Jimmy's someone I need to get on the show. He was at one day, they rotate rigs through. One day in orientation, we were at the actual academy and we were loading, I think it was 5-inch. And I forget what happened. Like he passed me a coupling and it hadn't made it to my hands and fell back and he gave me shit. So first impressions weren't so good, but yeah, he ended up being a good guy, definitely. And then you talk about Di Alexander as well. I actually had her on probably about 6 months ago now, and we talked about that very thing, death notifications and
I'll have to look back at it. I didn't catch it. Yeah, she does a great job with that.
Yeah, and this is a thing that I talked to her about and some other people, Alex Jaber. When you think about how we're trained, if you, for example, do a primary search, you find the person, you come out, congratulations, great job, you succeeded.
Right.
Paramedic school, you do a mega code, okay, you've got Brady, now you got, VTAC, then, you convert, okay, normal sinus, congratulations. But then you go in the real world, especially a black cloud like me that had 0 code saves in 14 years, you realize that it kind of sets them up for failure because we don't save most cardiac arrests or any of them in my case.
Right.
So if you're not throwing in sometimes in a mega code like they didn't make it, but you did everything right, congratulations, then we're not setting them up for what happens. We didn't get there in time. The lady had already run over her mother by that point. There's nothing you can do.
Right.
The kid's already dead in the fire. There's nothing you can do. And I think that's another discussion for the fire service is how can we tweak training so that you're training for success, but you can be extremely successful and the outcome can still be tragic. And I think that part we're missing a little bit.
That's a good point. Yeah, because it's like every training you go to, it's always we win, you know, and that's unfortunately not life,
Absolutely not. All right. Well, then as you're progressing through, when was it that you decided to kind of look into the real estate world, and let's talk about that side for a moment.
So I've always been interested in it. My dad, back in 2011, he was getting kind of 10 years, 15 years out from retirement, from the divorce. He never really started putting away. And the company had just sold and changed hands, and he ended up getting a good chunk of change. So he decided to buy a rental cabin up in Tennessee. Now he's retired, and he ended up having three at one point. And, he bought it for 100,000, and I think it sell for 500,000 now. So you start looking at retirement, and obviously, a job like this, you get 30 years, you get beat up, and that's how they keep you, is that, yeah, we're going to pay you okay now, but the pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow. So, just stick around long enough, and you'll get it. And I think that's why they've actually made the Florida drop system 8 years, because now with the issues of retention and getting more people, that I think they're having to kind of entice people to stay a little bit longer to make them, fill those seats. And it's terrible in a way.
I didn't realize it had gone to 8 now, because it was 5 before?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness.
5-year drop. Now it's an 8-year drop, right? So, I mean, since when does the state want to give you more money? But I think it's definitely a reaction to the decrease in applicants, the increase in need for people, and then, just trying to keep some experience. But yeah, so my dad's experience with real estate and seeing it, and then my uncle, who's a fireman up north, he has a duplex in Waltham where he lived at the bottom and he rented the top and then paid the thing off. And then, now he's just cash flowing continuously. So when I was super involved with the fire department, like, I'm the type of person where if I'm into something, I'm all in. So it's like, I dive in and do all of it. So with recruit training, I was all in, and that's all I was doing for 5 years. But, after a while, like, it just felt like I was constantly living paycheck to paycheck. And it wasn't like I was living some luxurious lifestyle. It was just between driving, car, things come up in life. I've got 2 kids, vacation here and there, and then obviously, like, Orange County's only had one raise on time in 17 years that I've been here. So, I mean, it's like you're constantly playing catch up. And so I started thinking back to when my dad told me he was wanting to get into the fire service so he could still do the oil truck route, because he'd have all those days off to do it, but then he'd have the security of the fire department. And that's where I started thinking to myself, maybe I need to look into just doing something else, because one, I'm not going to be exposing myself to all the extra calls, working the field overtime and doing all that stuff. And, a lot of the older guys, like, they always said, like, don't get another job. Just do this. Because if you just do this, it all goes towards your retirement, So I bought into that philosophy. After I stepped down from the union, I went back and I did a recruit class, and it was weird. It was like that same thing that was driving me to do it for that previous 5 years. It just wasn't there anymore. I didn't have that same, like, passion for it. And so after that class, it was December of 2022. I told my wife, I go, I'm going to make some changes, and it's probably going to be a little tight, but I need to do something completely different. So a friend of mine, Tony Kibler, he actually left Orange County and he's doing real estate full time. I had seen him on social media, and I gave him a call and I was like, hey man, what are you going to do to get your license? So he sends me, some info, and I did some research, and I'm like, all right, you know what? Just take action and do it. So I bought the online course. I did everything, and within a month and a half, I was done, got my certification. I called Tony back. I'm like, all right, now what? He's like, oh shit. He's like, you're already done? I'm like, yeah, I got my state license. And he's like, you realize, like, I've talked to probably 20 people over the last few years, and you're the only one that's ever called me back saying you did it. I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. And so I ended up getting with eXp Realty. They are like one of the largest real estate companies in the world. It's an international brokerage. And from there, it was just, all right, let's go. Let's figure it out. So anybody that wants to get into real estate, just realize, like, you don't just walk into anything and have instant success, right? It's a completely different environment. You are not guaranteed a paycheck, and it's all based off of how much work you're willing to put into it. So the fortunate thing is that I know how to work, and I was putting all that work into the fire department for an hourly rate. And now I get to put all that work into my own business. But that first year, 6 months into it, I think I had about $10,000 on my credit card, because between get my license, get my MLS, and not having the overtime. Because I told my wife, I'm like, I am not working overtime. If I'm going to go do this thing, I got to be all in every single day I'm off. I'm making cold calls. I'm taking classes. I'm figuring this thing out because I want to be an expert on it. So roll into like November, December timeframe, I had a couple of closings to where I was able to pay off that debt. And then January of 2024, I closed 6 houses in a month and ended up walking away with almost 50 grand. And I've never had that much money in my bank account in my entire life. So when that happened, that was like the proof of work, where I was like, okay, I got to really dive into this. And then I just went even harder, but I have a problem where I get so hyper focused on things. Maybe it's ADD or something, that when I'm doing it, I don't know how to do that balance of work life. I just either do a lot or I'm doing nothing. And so it's like over the last few years, it's given me the time to kind of find that balance, where now, between just doing traditional real estate transactions, Tony and I have bought an investment property that we're flipping, that we're actually going to close on next month. And now I'm becoming an investor. So it's funny how everything that, like, and it's only happened in 2.5, 3 years. So it's like, it's crazy how fast your life can change when you all of a sudden just go into something completely different, but actually do it. We all talk about making changes all the time, but it's like with your podcast, would you ever have dreamed in a million years that you'd have 80,000 followers and you're interviewing Josh Brolin? Probably not, but it's just every day you do those little actions,
Yeah, no, exactly. And this is what's such an important conversation that we're having right now, because you've literally underlined a couple of the pushbacks really from the firefighter level when we're talking about the healthier work week. First thing is, again, let me put it from the chief's point first. I always used to hear, well, if we give them more time off, they'll just work more, which I thought was a fucking arrogant statement, that you are now in charge of someone on their days off as well. But that's not the case. It's if you are understaffed and you're relying on overtime as your staffing model, then when they work more, you're saying another 24 hours at your fire department. What actually needs to happen is when you are fully staffed and recruitment is high again because you got a healthy work week and people are testing for you and the overtime goes away. Now that conversation, it becomes, well, you got to educate them. And I'm all for even having this on paper. You are not allowed to take, a job at, overnight at an ER, private ambulance company overnight, work for another fire department. Because I think that's fair enough. If we're going to give you the rest and recovery that you need to be great on your shift, you can't screw that up on your days off. But that doesn't mean that you can't go into the realty industry or be a personal trainer or landscaping or construction or whatever the thing is, because at night you're going to go home. And you're going to sleep in your bed, and you're going to wake up and have breakfast with your kids. So the pushback at the firefighter level is, oh, well, if the overtime goes away, then I'm going to lose money. It's like, well, firstly, the most important currency is to go home to your family. Yeah, newsflash, that's 100%. The most valuable currency. Secondly, we're so brainwashed that we think that the best money is in the fire service. And you speak to people outside the fire service, they're like, my God, your pay is shit.
Yeah.
And like you said, of course, if you're building something at the beginning, you're not going to see a lot of money. But you speak to people, like Chris Booth is another one. I worked with him on a fatal house fire where the dude came running out on fire. One of the most bizarre calls I've ever run on. I wrote about it in my book. It's still, I know it bothers him. I think that's one of the reasons why he left. But he had, like yourself, had built up this other career, and he was able to transition into it. And is very successful in that too. But I think this is what firefighters need to hear. If you're going to do a 42-hour work week and leave your family for 24 hours, you should, in my opinion, unless you're able to just fund it on the firefighter's salary, you should think, what else would I love to do? Because God forbid you get hurt, you get fired, you need to move states, whatever it is. That gives you another entire tribe, another entire identity, and another entire income that you can lean into. God forbid something goes wrong.
100%. And, like what also pushed me initially and why I think I had such early success was because I planned on leaving. Like I had talked to Tony Renta, who left successfully and was running his own business, and some other guys. One thing Tony told me is set a date. Because if you never set a date, then you're never going to do it. And so, and at the point where I was at when I first was looking to get my license, I was burnt out from all the overtime, burnt out from doing the training, burnt out from doing the union, and just burnt out from everything in between. You know what I mean? So I was planning on leaving. I set it for December of 2025, which is coming up right around the corner. And that was the driving motivation. But what I found as time went on, the less time I was at the department, the more I started actually enjoying the job again. Because, like any fireman will tell you, like, if you are at the point mentally where you're like, I hate going to work or I'm miserable, then it's probably time for you to go. And honestly, like the more exposure and the more time you're there, that's what it's going to do to you. It's going to make you, like, I remember joining the job and being so excited. And it's like, I got that back, when I went to 30, and then I really got super involved. And then I lost that same passion for it for a little bit, just from trying to be the helper, right? Because all of us are wired to be the helper. So I'm like, let me do training. I'm going to do the union. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Spread myself too thin. And then on top of that, go into shift. And that was just like, I'm done with this place. I'm done with the politics. I'm done with all this nonsense. But now that I'm only there 10 days a month, I can do that. I still love riding on a fire truck. And that's all I want to do now. I just want to ride on a fire truck, go to the station, hang out with the guys, and have a good time for 24 hours. And it almost gives me that mental break of, if I'm doing a bunch of real estate transactions and I'm like, oh God, I'm like mentally drained, I make that my day off from all that. And now I go and I have fun with my friends at the fire department and run calls, and it's not saying it's always easy, but it's fun, and now I don't want to leave. Now I see myself like I can stay a lot longer. So to any of the guys that come in now that I talk to, I try and tell all of them, look, do whatever you can to find that second thing that you like doing outside of this job. Because now to me, the fire department is a hobby that I love doing. And I'm fortunate where if I wanted to leave tomorrow, I could, but I stay because I enjoy it and because I know I'm good at it. Like I know I can do it. I know I can help people and I'm equipped to do it. But if you're not mentally equipped to do something and you're not healthy enough to do it, how are you going to do that on the fire ground? You're not going to be able to do it. And if everybody could find that one thing that they can do outside of the fire department, they're setting themselves up for later. Because there's so many guys that made this job their identity that as soon as it's over, they're lost. Mm-hmm. They don't know what to do with themselves, and I know plenty of them. Like now they're working at Universal, like doing this, or they're working at Lowe's or something. It's like, find that next thing that you're passionate about before retirement. Not, all right, I just did 30 years and now it's time to leave. Now what? And then you wonder about suicide rates and all these other things. Like I don't see myself ever not working, just because I think it's important for all of us. Like when I was a kid, I remember thinking, man, I can't wait till I'm retired and I can just do nothing. And it's like, now it's like, if I don't have nothing to do, I'm going stir crazy. I got to do something, so set yourself up doing something that, even if it's not making a whole lot of money, you love doing it.
I think the performance side is also really important. If we're talking about, again, a healthy work week, that the whole point is in that 24 hours to be at your absolute peak. And it's really interesting that you were saying that. As you gave yourself more time off, you started loving being there when you were there. But there's this misnomer. I've even heard people say, oh, well, if we had a 24/72, then I'd barely be at the station and I want to be, in the trenches. But let me ask you this. How many of your favorite football, baseball, basketball, stars are like, well, I'm going to go play for two teams, because if I only play one
right.
game a week, it's not going to be enough. Fuck off. If you want to be better at your job, go take classes, work out, eat well, forge relationships at home. That way you're going to be, as you said, when you go for your 24 hours, you're going to be all in for that 24 hours. But this fantasy that, if you're there more, it makes you better. No, it makes you worse. Like, 24 hours without sleep is bad enough. If you're going into 48 hours, now we're going into danger area. And I always underline this with the sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation is only ever used deliberately for special forces selection, interrogation, and torture. So there is no performance side of sleep deprivation. It's degradation. We are getting worse and worse with every 24 hours. So if you really are the chest beater and you've grown out your mustache and you've got your leather helmet that you never wash, and you're that guy and you really say it's for them, then you should be fighting. You should be front of the fucking line fighting for the 24/72. So every 24 hours that you come back, you're as close to baseline. You've had rest and recovery. You've had ample time to do your kind of red line workouts. And now you come in and you're ready to be tip of the spear. But this misnomer that, if I just work all these shifts, I'm going to be a better firefighter. No, you're not. You're going to be worse. And if you're fighting a healthier shift, you are literally saying to your community, I want to be a shitty firefighter. That's it. But if you actually go for the healthy work week and then you have another, passion on the outside, whatever it is that you want to do, realtoring or, selling houses or whatever the thing is, that then is, as you said, going to create a reset. So when you come back the next shift, you're ready to go again. So I think that's such a beautiful perspective that kind of busts the myths that if a real passionate firefighter is there all the time, because it couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, and the good thing too is like, I think we're all hardwired to want to also help our own community, right? Like the fire department, first responders, and everything else. And so, it didn't start out when I got my license that I was going to be helping a majority of the people that I work with or in the industry. And so now it's like, instead of showing up on somebody's worst day to help somebody, now I get to help somebody buy a house, give them the keys to them and their family, take care of them through the process and make sure they're good. If I need to take a lower commission, I could do that. And then on the flip side, with investing on houses, like Tony and I, we started what's called fire flips. And if a house catches on fire and somebody's in trouble, we'll come in and give them, a fair offer that we can afford to give them. And then our goal is to continue using firefighters or people who have side businesses that are in the fire department to help rehab the project. So now it's like, it's becoming full circle, and it's this thing that, you start off on a path and then now all of a sudden you start kind of fine tuning it. And so now we're able to feed the tribe and kind of keep everything in our community. And that's the goal, is that I want all the people to kind of find what I found out through this process that wasn't planned. It's find that next thing you're passionate about, because it will keep you mentally sharp for when you actually need to be there. But I mean, I don't know how I did as many years as I did with all the overtime I was working. I mean, I'm sure the Adderall that I was taking at the time probably helped a little bit, which don't take too much of that, kids. Like I was taking probably 50 milligrams at one point, and then like your erections don't really last like they used to. And then I got off of it, and then now it's all good, but and that's the other thing, like the stimulants that people are using now in the fire department, caffeine, all these energy drinks that and I don't get me wrong, I like energy drinks, but the Adderall usage has gone through the roof, and it's not just usage, it's abuse, So now you're talking about adding to the sleep deprivation, having a chemical substance in your body when you're getting off shift, being physically dependent on it, and, being tired all the time. And now you're supplementing that tiredness with a drug to keep you awake. I don't know how, like, you're seeing why people's hormone levels are low. Like 5 years ago, I had my testosterone tested and I was like 680. And that's at like the peak of when I was working hard and everything else, because I was feeling tired, but I was like, I'm probably overworked. This year I got my test tested again, and it was over 1,000. And I'm not taking anything. It's literally from good, proper sleep, good nutrition, working out, and taking care of myself on my days off. And I don't work any overtime. I work my 10 days a month, and that's all I do. So to me, that's proof enough that you don't need to be there that long. It's not going to do anything good for you. And the older you get, the harder it is to maintain it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, even when I retired out, it was the Creek was the last place. Right when I did, I think my T was at like 550, and then I think it was a couple years later, up until recently, it stayed the same. It's still at about 700 and like 720, I think it was, at 51 years old. And the same thing,
Damn.
like not taking anything. Yeah. But this is the point, walking the walk, like exercise, taking control of my sleep to the point where I came off shift work, because if I'm going to be out here yapping about it, then, at that point, in that toxic environment that I chose to leave because of the organizational betrayal, I got to use myself as a guinea pig. And it's like, look, you don't need to be taking TRT. You need sleep, which is, again, flogging a dead horse. If we had a 24/72 and you had a full 72-hour recovery period between shifts, you wouldn't need to have any supplementation. That in itself will be enough to get you back to where you need to be. But a 24/48, and now you've got a 48/24 with mandatory, This is why we're falling apart physically, mentally, and even, our relationships. So, there's such a beautiful opportunity to take all these pieces like you're talking about, whether it's, forging something beautiful on your days off, whether it's just simply being home in time, not to mention, I think the start time conversation. Why are we getting there at 7:30 in the morning when we could get there at 11 a.m.? And that way you could sleep in if you got murdered all night running calls, and I could
Right.
have breakfast with my family before I go to the station. So there's so many,
Yeah.
proactive solutions, 911 integrated telehealth for the non-emergency calls so that you're not running them anymore. But, it starts with this A, belief that we can, and then B, the busting of the myths that, you know, you need to be there to work all this OT versus you could actually make more money and be a damn sight healthier if you just work the hours you're supposed to work. Of course, all hands when a hurricane or something's coming in, no one's questioning that. And then
Right.
saying,
Yeah.
what would I like to do when I wasn't in the fire service? What's that other thing that I love to do? Why don't I start a business doing that?
And it's funny you bring up like the hurricane, because I was having this conversation the other day, and it's like, because I've heard chiefs say to people, "This is what you signed up for." It's like, no, the fuck, I didn't. I signed up to be here for 2000, 2920 is what we're currently on, right? And then obviously, like you said, hurricanes. I look at that as like that's a deployment. That's the military, right? Like you got to be deployed when there's an emergency in the area. Fine, but to fix your staffing problem, no, that's not what I signed up for. Like you guys are supposed to maintain the staffing levels, you know?
Yeah, and this is the point. This is what angers me is the people that oppose changing the work week for the firefighters. They themselves work 40 hours a week and go home at 5 o'clock every night. And I
Right.
don't know how you can
Yeah.
look yourself in the mirror. I've written, and if you talk about mental health, we look at us, we look at the men and women that are running the calls, but we forget that the people in the government buildings that have no problem sleeping when their men and women are dying of all things because of their work week and the understaffing that they created. The firefighters and the paramedics and the engineers and lieutenants, they weren't in charge of recruitment and staffing. The ones wearing the bugles were at the top. So they sleep well, knowing that, like locally here, I mean, I've lost count of how many firefighters they've buried in the last few years, and they still just sleep fine at night. That's a huge problem to me. If you're working 40 hours and enjoying, being at home every night, you should be bending over backwards for the men and women in the trenches. And I'm seeing the opposite, which is why, I think that one of the most under-discussed things in the fire service is cowardice, and not refusal to make entry on a fire, but true moral courage to fight for your men and women and their families.
Yeah, and it's deflection, because you could even have these conversations with them, and they'll go, "Well, if you guys don't tell people to leave, then we wouldn't have this problem." It's like, bro, come on. You think me saying that that you should leave? No, they see the writing on the wall, And honestly, like even in the beginning stages of some of these guys' career, like now they're required to be a medic in 3 years, but they have to go to school the day they get off. They have to do all their rides and clinicals on their days off, and then they're overworked, and then they got to come back to shift. Like, why can't you do these clinical rides on duty, hire another overtime person for 12 hours to drive the unit so they can get their clinical hours on duty, and then they can actually enjoy a day or two off? Like that period of time that they have to go to school, I can't imagine having to do that if you've got a young family at home. Like when I got hired, my son was 6 months old and my wife just started nursing school. There is no way I would have been able to make that commitment and have a work-life balance and be able to maintain bills and do all that other stuff if I had to go to medic school. And now it's like the economy, I mean, inflation's crazy. So it's like, how are these kids making it?
When I went through like Orange County, they were talking about an in-house program. I kept waiting and nothing was happening. So I put myself through CF. I was going through a divorce. I was a single dad. I get 24 hours being murdered in Battalion 4, drive straight to college, sit through, 9 hours of classroom, then, get my son from daycare, be a dad the rest of the time. And then the next day, drop him off and now go do a 12-hour clinical with Marion or, the hospitals. Same thing, get my son, rinse and repeat for a year. I don't even know how I did it. When I look back, like my mind can't comprehend the logistics of it. But like I said,
Yeah.
and then you get no tuition reimbursement. And then I like literally right after I graduated, they announced the in-house program. But this is the problem. Like, what kind of message does that send? They're screaming for paramedics. one of
Right.
your firefighters has to go through that. And then all I get in return is mandatory over and over and over again, which is
Right.
why I ended up leaving, because I was a single dad. And one day after that deadly shift with Chris, where 3 people died that day, different incidents, and I'd already handed my notice in the morning, because they told me, hey, you're going to get hit again. I'm like, you know what? I was in Reedy Creek's process, but I hadn't done the medical yet. And I was like, fuck it, I'm done. You can't tell me I can't go home to my son as a single dad. I'm working the shifts I'm supposed to be working. But again, through your gross mismanagement, you're telling me that I can't go home to my, what was he then, a 4-year-old? So just to let you know, you're going to need someone for Station 70 next shift, because I won't fucking be there. And that's how I ended it. I was done. And it wasn't because I didn't
I don't
love the
blame you.
job. I love the job, but the mismanagement and the lack of ownership on the way that they staffed was, why they're bleeding people. It's not because, Dan Lennon said, James, you shouldn't stay here. It's shit. No, it's because it was shit. That was it. It was.
100%.
It wasn't the job. It was the working environment. Now, had it been a 24/72, my medic school experience would have been completely different if I just worked, 24 on, 72 off, and we were fully staffed. Same job, different working environment.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and at least in our organization, the change to engineers having to be on the rescues has been a complete, decimation of that rank. And now the overtime has shifted from what it used to be firefighter medics to now primarily engineer medics. The engineer medics, so our staffing model, you'll have an engineer assigned to the rescue and then a rescue driver. But if you're an engineer medic filling 2 spots and all they got to hire is a plain old rescue driver, now that overtime list comes up for mandatory, the engineer medics are getting slammed. And these are all the guys that came up in the system that you came up with that promoted to get off the box.
Mm-hmm.
And then they created this whole position, which, Chief Droz, I know what his intent was, but ultimately, when he left before the whole program was kind of finished, you left the administration behind, and they kind of just figured out what they could do. They put all this money into it. It's not working. And now you can't go back to your commissioners and go, hey, this isn't working. I know you guys put all this money into it. So now we're just going to maintain this terrible situation. And then, now these guys are getting slammed. And then you wonder why these guys are all disgruntled, telling these people, get the hell out of here before it's too late. So it's like, the good thing is finally with the new fire chief, we had him for dinner and we mentioned, some things about how they could resolve it. And one of the things they're going to do is they're going to make all the firefighters at least take a supervisory class so they can ride as a supervisor on the rescue. So now at least it'll give some relief. But now where's the overtime and all that other stuff going to get shifted to? Either way, you're not solving the ultimate problem. You're just another Band-Aid, another reaction.
Well, I hope the chief is different than when I was there, because I remember him bringing a tick into the station to see if we've been using the TV.
Yeah,
I'm just going to leave that
I mean, again, I remember it too. I was Battalion 5 back then. And I tell most people, I'm like, we all change over time. So my optimistic hope is he changed and maybe he sees things differently. But at the same time, I also don't get my hopes up because, growing up in an environment where my mom, who still struggles with substance abuse, always said, this is the last time I'm doing this, I'm quitting forever. And then it never really happens. I've got that like, okay, people say things all the time, but I'll see it when I see it,
Exactly. Actions speak louder than words. Well, speaking of that, it's a good way to kind of round off the conversation before we go to some closing questions. Back to the 343. The first year I did it, and I'm actually going to make a video because it was sad what I had to write on my back this last year, but I had lost 6 friends. So I had their names on my back, and I was at the Reedy Creek then. And that was actually really the 6 that really inspired the Behind the Shield podcast. That's what started it. 10 years later, well, I guess 11 technically now, I had to write on my back, there's not enough space on my back for the fallen this year. Because last year I had it on my back, on my chest, down my arms. There was no space left to write the names anymore. So the memorial element, and obviously Carl Andriano is a big part of that, and he was one of the 6. That's so important. But as we've gone on and watched this, there's 2 things for me specifically. Firstly, who is this English guy that yaps on this podcast the whole time? I've always with my workout partner Casey, we've always done the regular, not the masters division, because I wanted to prove a point. We're not going to win it, but I want to prove, well, if I'm 51 years old, I can still hold my own with the air quotes young guys, because this is what the fire service should be. I don't think you should
Yeah.
have easier tests for gender or age or anything like that. But the other thing
Agreed.
is I don't think there are many other places where you truly see brotherhood and sisterhood like the 343 Hero Challenge in Orange County. So talk to me about, your first experience with that, and then what have you seen as far as the last decade or so with that particular event?
So the first time I did it, me and Dan Barnard, we got hired together. We actually got hired with Carl as well. And so, yeah, when he passed, it was definitely like that. As a young guy, you always think you're unstoppable. And then when you see something like that happen to somebody so young, it kind of wakes you up and realize that, we all only have a finite amount of time here. So, the first time I did it, I just did it to compete. And, then we didn't win. So me being competitive, that was always that like, all right, I gotta win it. So every year, just go out there and do the thing. And I wasn't necessarily doing it as the memorial side of it. I don't think I was thinking that complexly when I was that young. And then as I've gotten older, the more you realize what the event truly means, the more you appreciate it, and that makes me appreciate the people who put it and put it in place and started it. Because now every year it is an excuse for us to actually get together and not just sit around and talk about the same stupid fire department conversations about calls we run and all this other stuff, but to actually catch up with this community that we've created of everybody that just likes to come out, compete, and have a good time and cheer for everybody. There's never like this animosity or any of this other stuff. It's always just a day to come out and kind of be together. And so it's just watching it evolve, and then also watching the same faces come back. That's how you know it has an impact on people and that they look forward to it every year. So I'm blown away, and I love the work Belinda did on it this year. I think she elevated it to the next level. I don't know if she's going to do the whole process again next year, because it is one of those things that's a labor of love. But I hope if she does do it, that she continues on doing it, and if not, I hope the next person continues to grow it the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've said this. I mean, when I went this time, I was going from person to person, hugging and talking to each other. And, a lot of them obviously Orange County guys and girls. And I was with some of my CrossFit friends, and I told them, just so you know, I haven't worked here for like 15 years. This is how this brotherhood, sisterhood is. It's been, well, not quite 15, but 12, whatever it's been. So this is what happens when you care. Like, you don't, those relationships don't end. Obviously, you're not seeing each other for a while, but that truly is a brotherhood and sisterhood. My crew, my Truck One crew in Anaheim, were at my wedding 10 years later, and I was only at that department for 3.5 years. So when people say the brotherhood is dead, I say, you're just looking in the wrong fucking place. And you're
Yeah.
part of the problem. If you're even saying that, you're part of the problem, because you need to be creating that. Now, don't get me wrong. There are, like my last place, there are environments that are so damn toxic that it's extremely hard to create that. But, if you just give up on it, then what have we got left? So find those places where there is that, the Orlando Fire Conference, the 343, some of these other events that have got going on. Because I love every single year you'd see the same people, all different, like you said, different fire departments. But the ones that aren't buying into the city's better than county or all that other bullshit rhetoric, but just see each other
Right.
as firefighters. We're not any better. We're running the same damn calls all over this country. We are the same person. So I love the fact, to me, that's kind of like the flame, in the gas burner, that little pilot flame. It's still going. No one. It's not going to go out, and the more, obviously we feed it and fuel it, the bigger it's going to get again. But that, to me, is a real kind of re-up on, being reminded of what the fire service is truly about.
Well, the great thing about the fire service too is that there could be people you don't talk to for years, but you know that if you ever called somebody and said, "Hey, man, I need help," you'd have an army of people at your doorstep ready to help you. Doesn't matter what it is, and that could be people you don't even necessarily get along with most of the time. It's just, we are the helpers, and we will be there when somebody says, "Help me."
Absolutely. Well, I want to shift some closing questions so I can be mindful of your time. The first one I love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
So, one of the books I read, and it's definitely a great book as far as, I guess I'm trying to think of the right way to say it, but you know, maybe how some people who are politically motivated and the way they maneuver and how to watch out for those people. There's a book called The 48 Laws of Power. I read that book and it blew my socks off because now it's like everything that it talked about, it's almost like a manual to how to be like a dictator, in a way, or just like, psychologically like maneuver people. And that's not what I was looking to get out of it. It's just I kept hearing about this book, and when I finished reading it, I remember I was talking to Jamal. I'm like, I feel like this is how I know how now some of these chiefs think sometimes, So if you ever want to read a book that'll blow your socks off, definitely read that. And I started getting into audiobooks, but the one thing I noticed is that I definitely grasp more by actually seeing the print to paper. Whereas, you kind of start letting your mind wander when you're listening to an audiobook. So that was definitely a good one. And then I go down like 1984. I'm sure, that's a book a lot of people have heard of. I love that book because there's a lot of parallels between, what was going on in that book compared to what's kind of going on now. And then Jocko's book, obviously, I think everybody has probably read at this point. That one, Extreme Ownership, is definitely one that applies to anybody who's looking to be a company officer, but also just being a person, right? Nobody wants to hear excuses. And if you're in any way involved in anything and it goes sideways, then it ain't on anybody else. It's on you, because it's either you didn't speak up or you let it happen. But if you're there and you have the ability to use your voice to fix something and you don't, then it's on you.
Yeah, moral courage again. It's funny you said with the 48 laws. It reminds me, I had Hoist Gracie on years ago. I interviewed him in California, and he was talking about learning striking. And he didn't learn striking to use striking. He learned striking so he could then counter striking with jujitsu. And I feel it's the same with that book. The more you can be educated on the underhand maneuvers of some of these horrendous leaders and tyrants, the more you're going to have the reaction to it. You're going to be able to counter it.
Yeah. And then here, I got this one. Hold on. So this one, it's Man and His Relationship with God. I got it at a garage sale years ago. I don't know why I picked it up, but I just saw the title. Definitely a good book that, it kind of mixes some scripture, but there's just some good stuff in there. And then Benjamin Franklin's Virtues is also one that it's, let me see if I got it in here. I was just looking at it the other day. Yeah. I was in Boston recently and I saw this in the gift shop and we went to go visit his house. And it's a very small, like quick read, but basically it's something that in there he talks about, like, if you do these every single day, it's basically the way you start and the way you'll finish and how you can incorporate these things into your life. So definitely a good one if anybody's looking to kind of change the way you're doing things. As you get older, I think it's natural where you start reflecting on who you are as a person and how you can do better, So it's like as you're getting older, and I remember reading in a psychology class I took in college where, in your 20s, you're one way, but then you hit a certain age and then you go from student to mentor. And so now that I've kind of hit that different stage in my life, I don't know what happens. Maybe it's, we're so late to mature mentally that's why that, takes on. Whereas women, obviously they're more mature in the earlier years of their life, but it's definitely I'm enjoying the process of kind of that evolution of that next phase of my life. And, raising kids, obviously it helps as well. But yeah, definitely these ones are good ones to pick up and just thumb through every once in a while.
Beautiful. What about films, documentary, TV that you love?
Well, me and Dave Coughlin love a movie called Ted, but it's it's not.
That's a good
film. It's a yeah. Well, it's a different one than probably the one you're thinking of. But let's see, what's the latest one I saw? Have you seen that movie Weapons? It's kind of
Yeah,
like a horror
with
sci-fi.
Josh Brolin. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, he is in that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a great movie. Like I like anything that's got original storytelling because I feel like the trend of like superhero movies and the flashiness and all that other stuff and like I tried to watch a movie with my youngest son the other night. Me and my wife turned it on. Phenomenon with John Travolta. Remember where he like sees a light and then he like all of a sudden he's like super smart and then he starts having like telepathy and then at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, he ends up having a tumor. But it's a written story, just kind of that same thing where this guy all of a sudden gets this gift out of nowhere and now he's just got this thirst for knowledge and kind of how he navigates that whole story. You ever seen that one or no?
I don't think I ever watched it. I can see the cover in my head, but I don't think I ever watched it. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, but I mean nowadays like these kids they can't watch anything with like a story. It's got to be all flash pizzazz or whatever. I'm like, yeah, you guys missed the boat on the good movies. Like Shawshank Redemption, was one of my all time favorites when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing because I didn't realize Shawshank and Green Mile are both Stephen King stories.
Really?
So, yep. So because I'm actually working with some guys with the show I'm developing at the moment, and they're in the horror world. And there was another one recently. Oh my God, the name just fell out my head. But yeah, so that world, obviously they have their horror, but then there's also this really powerful kind of human storytelling element to it as well. So it's a pretty interesting kind of genre because yes, you got your slasher, but then every so often, Stephen King, for example, will put one of the most beautiful human stories ever written out on screen too.
Yeah. So speaking of like movies and stuff, what's the latest with your project and how did that like whole thing come to fruition? Because I've been following it, but I don't want you to have to put too much info out.
Yeah, I mean, basically, it's a television adaptation of Kinder, my book, my latest book, with the goal to. It's funny you mentioned 1984 because this is kind of what I've been saying. The way 1984 worked was obviously the screen was used to divide a nation, which, as you said, seems very 2025. What
Yeah.
if? What if you put hope and healing in every home on every screen? So by using this story, and it'll be kind of like a standalone series, Band of Brothers type thing. There's another arm to it, which I'll talk more about as we get developed, but that's going to provide tools as well and kind of hopefully get rid of some shame and guilt so that people can actually literally start taking that first step. But yeah, I mean, it all came from that whole phrase, if you want to change the world, start at home. The IFF isn't going to change the world. The president isn't going to change the
Yep.
world. I know that because I've seen it, and presidents
Yeah.
plural. So what can we do is you can literally get to the person. What can I do? What can I do then within my home to my partner, my children? And then what can I do to step outside my front door and be a mentor of my community and take the Dan Lennon from the bad route and take him into the good route? So that's the kind of grand thing, but I'm doing it very differently than Hollywood normally does. Normally, there's this whole fundraising thing, and then you bring actors and people on. I've done the opposite. I'm like, who was the right kind of soul to be part of this project? If I get enough of those people that don't even know what role, what, the money or anything, and then we go to the studio, and then obviously the funding will have to come. I think that you're going to have the right group of people that truly want to tell it for the right reason rather than just to make a profit, like you said. So that's
Yeah.
the goal. Super early, pre-production at the moment, but I'm just, to me, it's the only way that you can really make a dent is, through the screen. And this is what my book was originally written for. I always had that in mind. But now a year later, and I've seen how deeply the book has hit people, now I'm like, okay, it's time to pull the trigger. So, there's some people in Hollywood that I'm kind of hoping are going to attach themselves to the project that would definitely give it more momentum, but I don't want to presume either. So we shall see.
Right.
But yeah, so far I've got about 7 people from, makeup and special effects through to stunts, through, to some of the actors. So we're kind of compiling it and morphing it. And hopefully it'll be one of those shows where people don't just hit stop and then go, well, that was good. But the next day, the next week, the next month,
Right.
the next year, they're still talking about it. So
Yeah, it's planting those seeds. And if you ever need a stuntman, I'd be happy to lend my services free of charge.
I appreciate it. Well, this is one of my funny little things down the road is, you get like Jack Carr, and he had a cameo in his show, Terminal List, where he was, a bad guy
Right.
and got shot in a car. I want to do a stunt cameo because normally writers aren't stuntmen too. So I want to actually
Right.
be in one of the scenes, probably the
Right.
fire scenes where like, oh shit, that's James.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Yeah, you got to, yeah. Well, that's
absolutely.
good,
All,
man. See, it's cool. It's cool seeing people that I've known over the years, like do bigger things that I think like none of us would ever known like it was even possible. You know what I mean? Like watching like your progression from where you started to where you're at now. It's just I hope other people that watch these things realize like if he can do it, you can do it. Whatever that other thing is, like just
exactly.
put yourself in that room. And then like you brought it up earlier where it's like if all you ever do is sit at that kitchen table at the fire department and you don't venture out and meet other people outside of that circle, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but that's all you're ever going to do. And I feel like there's so much life that we have. Like try some different things. Don't have regrets later on and sitting around at the firehouse watching the same bullshit on TV. Like go out there and chase it. You know, it doesn't take much. And in the beginning, yeah, you gotta get going. But any boulder you're pushing up a mountain is going to be rough at first. But once you reach that top and you push it over and it starts rolling down, everything changes and it changes fast. You know, that's what
Yeah.
I want for everybody.
100%. Yeah, I was just talking to someone, actually Jeff Cool, one of the survivors of the Black Sunday fire in FDNY, and we were just talking. He's coming on the show. But this podcast has taken me to meet so many people of all walks of life. I mean, firefighters from different departments, all the way through to neuroscientists and Navy SEALs and prison governors from Norway and educators from Finland and you name it. But you're so far out the echo chamber that you realize like, oh my God, there are solutions to all these things. But if I just stayed
Yeah.
in the firehouse table, maybe I'd be a little better with a Halligan or tying knots, but I'm not looking at the macro. So this is what I would say for people is just get outside that echo chamber, whether it's political, whether it's the job, whatever it is. Be proud, keep that as one of the notches in your belt. But the moment you start really kind of breaking down those walls, you realize, there's an entire world out there that, for us, and this is, I think, one of the problems with us critically thinking, which is why I literally get some people pushing back saying, I'd rather do a 48.96 than a 24.72, which is literally saying, I'd rather work 56 hours away from my family than 42. But it's because they're so
Right.
sleep deprived. They can't critically think. They can't even comprehend common sense anymore because it's dogma. It's just so ingrained. But like you said, by pushing those walls down and then hopefully, this 24.72 revolution that's happened, really reframing that, when we have happier firefighters, then you're going to believe that you can do some of these other things. And then that's like you said, it's a snowball effect then. And then, you as a person are going to grow and your family and your kids are going to, benefit from that too. And then so is the fire service, because now we're going to have the humility to actually be open to new ideas. And again, the rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah. And I mean, if I look back at my own career, one of my biggest regrets is I put too much time in the department and missed some time with my family. Whereas now I look at my kids, especially with my son being 18, I'm glad I caught myself when I did. You know what I mean? So if there's anybody out there who's crushing the overtime and chasing that bag and, like just focused on the now, which I get it, man. Like it's tough. Like when you're not making what you need to make to maintain, what's going on, especially now, just remember that all that stuff's temporary, but so is your kid's childhood. You know what I mean? And I think that's why you see the divorce rates in our industry go up is if you're not home, then how are you maintaining that relationship at home? Like I'll never in my life when I retire say, man, I'm so glad I worked all that overtime.
Nope.
Never, never, but like now when I retire, I'm going to be like, I am so glad that I spent as much time possible at home with my kids. And even though I had to go to work and honestly, my wife likes it because I'm only gone 10 days a month. It gives her break. She likes her break when I'm gone for 24 hours, gives her a chance to miss me, but then I'm home, whereas before I was always gone.
Hmm.
and that's a hard way to raise a family and not be around your loved ones.
Well, you think about as well, what's one of the things that you hear when we lose someone to suicide? Oh, well, they were going through a divorce. So they blame
Right,
the relationship. Well, why were they going through a divorce? I know
right,
so many firefighters that were head over heels in love with their wives, because these are men that I'm thinking of, that I've watched it deteriorate and they're heartbroken about it. So, the divorce isn't separate from the fire service. If you're mandoed all the time and you're working 80 hours a week, that's
yeah,
destroying your family because you are literally not
yeah,
there when you got a kid waiting for you to come home. And I try and share those homecoming videos all the time to remind us this is how excited our children are for us to walk through the door.
yeah,
And then mom or dad has to tell them, hey, they're not coming home now. I mean, that's devastating for a kid. So,
yeah,
that's why it's so important that we get away from, again, the money, which you can, A, you get more of an hourly rate when you go to 42-hour work week anyway. And B, if you do a side project, then you get home, in your own bed every evening. So the money is there regardless. But I always say the currency is in the time with your children because you'll never,
yeah.
ever get that back.
Yeah, and I mean that's the beauty of when you actually own your own business is you get to set your schedule, right? I don't work every third day on my business. I work on it when I can, and if I need to take a break and I need to go pick the kids up, or I need to have breakfast, or I want to go to the gym or whatever, it's my time. I set my schedule how I want to, and I think it's hard for people who don't know that life yet because if all you've ever known is the fire department schedule, then it's hard to break free of that, matrix, so to speak. But once you know it, then you're like, I'm never going back to that. Like, because I never will. I mean, obviously, I know I could get mandatory, coming off shift. You got to work holidays sometimes. I do that all going in, but it's not sustainable for a career to work that much overtime and walk out in a healthy fashion. Most of the guys I know that work like that leave, now they're going to get healthy. Now they're going to get double knee replacement surgeries. Now they're going to start doing this other stuff. And it's like, why not prepare yourself so you can run out of this place when you retire? It's a great job, but I mean, like, you're not supposed to be doing field work in your late 50s, and then there's guys that have done it and kudos to them, but the bulk of the population, no way. It's not sustainable. And,
No.
and I don't want to be one of those guys that retires and then 5 years later I'm dead.
Yeah, which is a universal observation. There's no study because, again, sadly, we don't count our retirees. So when we have these supposed, this is how many firefighters die, it's like bullshit. Think about all the
Yeah.
retirees that we lose 5, 10, 15, 20 years too soon after they retire. There's no statistic whatsoever. But this is the thing that we have, no matter where you are in the country, they all say 5 years after retirement. So clearly then, if, north, south, east, west, central, they're all observing the same thing, that is a reality. And so you do your 5, 8 year drop, and then you do drop right after. And what was the point of trying to get that, highest 3 or whatever it was that you're doing all this extra work if you're just simply then going to pass away, 1, 2, 3, 5 years later? So it is an important part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I got tired of this thing I created in my mind of one day I'll get to that. One day when I retire, I could do all these things, traveling and all this other shit, and I'm like, why wait? I could drop dead tomorrow. I thought about guys like Carl and, people that I've known that's passed away over the years. And it's like, you don't have forever. We all think, it's sad that happened to that guy, but it won't happen to me. The shit, it won't. It could happen to any single one of us, So that's why, like, taking care of yourself earlier in your career and maintaining that healthy lifestyle is important. But I mean, you could be on a call and on the highway and some asshole is not paying attention, goes around the engine and then smack, Happened to Chad Lowry. Thank God he didn't die, but I mean, that could happen to any single one of us. So it's like, take those moments to be home, be present, be with your family. Don't wait till the end of your career thinking you're going to have all this time and then poof, something happens.
Exactly. Well, a couple more closing questions. The first one, is there a person that you recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Ooh, let's see. Have you had Jamal on yet or no?
I haven't actually, but he's another one I should. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
he did so much even when I was there.
Yeah, him. Honestly, my first lieutenant, Steve Kleiman. I don't know if you remember him.
I do. Yeah, I actually had him.
Yeah,
Oh, I think he was one of our instructors actually in the academy. Yeah, I think he's one of the lead
yeah,
ones.
he was. Yeah, he was mine. And then honestly, when I got hired, I was 24. He's probably a little closer to my dad's age, so it was kind of that father figure, but wasn't your father type thing. And then also would kind of tell you the things you didn't need that you needed to hear, but maybe your dad didn't have the heart to tell you. Not a roughneck guy, like very understanding. Like there was a kid that we had transferred to our station, and he was known as a fucking turd, right? And Kleiman, being the guy he was, he's like, I'm going to give this guy an honest shot. And so, this guy like physically couldn't force a door. Like there's a lot of things this guy was lacking. Not a bad person, just one of the guys would say I was a shitty fireman. But Kleiman gave this guy every opportunity, worked with him day and night, like tried to do everything for him. And when Kleiman was getting ready to transfer out, it just happened that he had to actually write this guy up that same day, his last shift he was working at the station. So Kleiman said, he wrote him up, and the kid, took the write up, and he goes, "Hey, LT, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate you taking the time to coach me and mentor me, because nobody else has ever done that for me since I've been here." So to me, it just kind of spoke volumes to the type of person he was. And there's some people, like there's a few things that happened, along the way closer to his retirement with some other guys that I'm friends with here in the department. And the one thing that I know about him is that he is somebody that would do the right thing if it didn't benefit him because it was the right thing to do. And that's a very rare thing. Most of the time, if somebody is going to lose something out of their own self-interest, then normally they're not going to kind of, put themselves on the cross, so to speak. But Kleiman is that guy that he would, no matter what, do the right thing, even if he wasn't going to benefit from it or if it was even going to hurt him.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I liked him a lot. And actually, we worked. I forget the name of the station. It's right against the turnpike as you're going south into Orlando. It's on the right there, and I remember floating there a few
58.
times. I think it was, yeah. I think he was there when I was there. So,
Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. All right. Well, then the last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you and, of course, the First Responder Realtor. What do you do to decompress?
So definitely getting home and go to the gym first thing. Like that's even before I go to shift. Like I wake up at my house in DeLay at about 4:30, kind of roll out of bed, get my thing going, get to the station by 6, get my workout in. Cause for me, it's like, if that's hanging over my head, like middle of the day, and then we start getting busy, it like drives me nuts. Like, I'm like, I got to get a workout in. And so that's always like number one. And then I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but I like doing gardening. I don't know how that started, but like yard work, gardening, like I've got a whole thing on the side of my house. And really just spending time with my family. I know it sounds like a cliche, answer, but it's just doing things that are not involved with the fire department that just make you happy. Like I love the fact that I'm able to go pick my son up at school, and be home for dinner time and do a family game night and play Yahtzee or, watch something with them, just whatever. But, and like, it's funny because my kids, like, I'm pretty loose with the way I talk. So it's like, we have a lot of like jokes and we scare each other and we do all that stuff. So it's just like our house is full of laughter all the time. And that's the thing I enjoy the most. Is in a way, it's almost like the firehouse where we goof around and we have a good time and without all the call volume. So it's like, I try and keep the firehouse like I treat my own house. I just have a good time and keep it light.
Beautiful. Well, for people listening, if they want to reach out to you personally or find you on social media, and then the same with the Realty side, where are the best places to find you?
Yeah, so Facebook, you can find me on there, Daniel Lennon. Instagram is probably the best way. It's at Daniel Lennon Realtor, at Dan _ Lennon _ Realtor. And then TikTok, and I don't think my MySpace is active anymore, unfortunately. Sorry.
And do you have a website, or is it best place just through social media?
Social media, it has all the tags on there and stuff like that. Yeah, it's pretty easy. And then if there's anybody interested in actually learning how to get your real estate license, because I'm starting to kind of step into a role of, especially first responders, like help the community that you serve. If you go to partnerwithdanlennon.com, you can find me on there, and there's some videos you can watch. And there's no charges or anything like that. My goal is to almost continue to build this real estate business that I'm starting on, and build a team of people where our primary focus is first responders, veterans, teachers, nurses, like all the people, all the helpers that are in the community. Let's be the ones that kind of help them. And the goal is not through profit, because, you're going to make money selling a house, but I'm a big advocate of, if I know what it takes to make, $5,000 in the fire department working overtime. So if I sell a house and I can give you a little extra money to close on it, I'm perfectly fine with that. I can't look at somebody in the face and go, "Hey man, sorry, you got to go to ride Rescue 42 so I can get my extra commission that this other person's not going to pay me." So it's nice that I have the insulation of having that ability to help people to where they're able to achieve the dream of home ownership, and not have to pay an arm and a leg for it, especially in today's market.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of that, actually, I was going to close out one quick question, because I'm here in Ocala, where, again, Marion County, suppose you don't have the money for extra firefighters, but our county has exploded, and there are literally housing developments and apartment complexes going up every single corner. So again, how we have no money, I'm no mathematician, but it doesn't make any fucking sense to me. That being said, what kind of market is it now? Because it seems like there's a danger of saturation with so many things being built at the moment.
So, I mean, so there's two stats that you always look at or see on the internet, right? They'll say housing inventory is at this thing, but it's a nationwide thing. So you really have to get with the local realtor to look at all that. Now, with that said, inventory is higher because with the influx of people moving to Florida, the builders started building like crazy. And then obviously with the COVID stuff, it drove the prices up. So over the next couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised if prices stay kind of flat. You're getting a lot of people now who were, waiting for interest rates to drop before they sell their house and move. Now they're just tired of waiting and realizing that the 1% interest rates are never coming back. And we're actually where we're supposed to be. Like, historically speaking, 6% is pretty much what like the average has been over the course of, since they've been tracking mortgage rates. So you have people who are listing their house. It's sitting on the market, longer than they normally would. Now, like Volusia County, I think we're at like 70 days on market. And what happens is that they end up doing price reductions, because if they'd had this house for 10 years, they've got equity. So when you have price reductions now going below what the normal line is for what the property values are in that area, that comparable drags everybody else's value down. And so that's why you're kind of seeing this little bit of a correction. But with COVID, you kind of got a hyperinflation in a lot of ways, because all of a sudden interest rates bottomed out, and then you had these investors picking these houses up left and right with 1%. A DSCR loan, which is an investor loan, you were getting them at 3 or 4%. So I think you'll see a correction, but I don't think you're going to see a real estate crash, just because what led to the housing crisis and the crash back in 2008 is not what's going on today. What happened then was subprime lending. You had people who had no income verification that really should have never qualified for a loan, and they were incentivizing lenders to just pump loans out. And so what you would get is you'd have somebody who didn't have a job, or a low paying job, who were qualifying for a $400,000 house, but year one their interest rate was 1%, and then by year 5 it would balloon to 10%. And when the economic crisis started picking up and everything started crashing, all these people couldn't offload these houses, and then you had this huge inventory dump and the banks failed. That's not what's going on now. Now you just have builders who are building and building and building. And with all the existing houses on the market as well, you're seeing a stall. So if you're a home buyer, this is actually a great time to buy, because you can get all your closing costs covered. And in a lot of these new construction developments, I've been able to negotiate people getting 3.99% interest rates, because the builders are going to Wall Street and they're buying the mortgage rates down for their houses.
Interesting. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's making it very competitive.
Yeah, because it is interesting. It's not my world at all. I actually bought a foreclosed home, the one before this one, and that was after the crash, so I got it for a good amount. And then before that, I was in California, and pre-crash, like they were they were telling me I got to get on the property ladder. I'm like, you've lost your mind. Like some of my friends had a
Yeah.
1950s 800 square foot house, and they were paying $700,000 for it. And I'm like, there's no way, no way. I'm gonna rent. I'm gonna wait. And then sadly,
Yeah.
obviously what happened. Thank God I did. But yeah. But now you're seeing the amount of inventory that's going up in Marion County here. I was kind of wondering if it was going to saturate. So, but that's encouraging to hear. Okay, if there's more houses, but there's not going to be a crash, and hopefully that will put some of the fears at ease then.
I mean, if there's a crash, it won't be because of what happened in 2008. But I mean, depending on what happens in New York, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see a lot of people relocating down here.
Yeah.
Just because with the cost of living there, the taxes, and I mean, I have friends that are up there that are retiring, and their pensions are so good they can come down here and like that area, you can get a brand new construction house where you are for like 300 grand. Nice brand new house. I mean, it's nice up there. So, it's just one of those things where if I had a crystal ball, I could give you all the answers, but just based off of at least what I'm seeing, it's not going to be a crash based off of the mortgage industry. Now, if something happens like with the economy wise, where like nobody has a job and they can't pay their mortgage, then that's going to lead to obviously foreclosures. But I don't really know if that's coming. It's hard to say.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it's been such a great conversation. We've gone all over the place.
You're gonna have to chop this thing up to make it make sense.
No, they never make sense. That's why I do it this way. So, so I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time today and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Actually, one more thing I forgot to mention when it comes to the safety or health and wellness thing. So, my buddy is a chiropractor here in DeLand Chiropractic. He ordered these tests and he's doing it with his family, and then he wanted me to do one. So I bought it. I still haven't done it. I got to turn it in, but this is to test your PFAS levels in your blood. And so this will give you a baseline for what your PFAS levels are. So obviously with us, with our gear, it's something that they brought up, with the gear's inner lining and all that other stuff that's in there. So he has his stuff. So he has his numbers. I'm going to show him mine, but he's actually going to develop a protocol that will hopefully help excrete and get the forever chemicals out of us. So I'm in the process of kind of working with him. And then I'm hoping that, in the next year, I can actually present it to our safety and wellness department and just say, hey, is there any way that maybe we can do something with this either at the physicals or, you use your HSA card and you buy it and then you follow this protocol. And hopefully that'll kind of get some of these forever chemicals out of our systems.
It's funny you say that. I was just at the Brothers Helping Brothers conference, and I had some guests on probably 6 months ago now from Denmark, and they developed a probiotic that pulls PFAS out, and they're just in the human trials now. So
Really?
Hopefully that's another thing that's going to be coming out. Hitheshi, one of their people, was at the conference, so we got to hang out for a few days. But yeah, there's some exciting things happening. There's obviously space for more than one thing. But, giving blood is supposed to be one of the things that we can do. Hopefully this probiotic will pull, more out. But, there's so many of these different PFAS compounds out there that the more kind of layers that we can add to it, the better.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that's why I don't drink out of plastic bottles anymore. I don't do any of that shit. It's just like try and stay away from all of it if you can. No Teflon, no nothing.
Absolutely. All right, mate. Well, again, thank you so much. It's been such a great conversation.
Yeah, man. Yeah, let's do it again sometime.